listening to the Bomb Hole.
Bomb Hole Podcast.
It's going to be very hot. It's going to be very uncomfortable for everybody.
The Bomb Hole.
I'm gonna slide down them big hills, you know what I mean, on the big, nice burgundy snowboard.
Okay, it's another beautiful day in the booth here at the Bomb Hole, which is presented by Pub Beer and Liquid Death. Now, Stony Buds, how are we doing, my friend?
So good, my dog.
Always love hearing that. Now, to my left, we have Gunny, a.k.a. Chris Gunnarson. How we doing, dog?
Doing good. What an honor. Can't believe I'm here in the Bomb Hole. This is incredible.
Well, we appreciate you coming down. It's, I think I would say on behalf of me and Buds, the honor is on our half. But I just want to do a quick little intro for those listeners who are unfamiliar with who you are and what you've done. Gunny basically founded S.P.T, Snow Park Technologies, where you fabricated features for terrain parks, built over 250 competition courses, events such as X Games, U.S. Open, built the DC Mountain Lab, Shaun White's private halfpipe project X, Van's Triple Crown, Nixon Jib Fest. Former marketing director at North Star at Tahoe, started a TV show called Mountain Movers, conceptualized the X Games Real Series with Real Snow, Real Moto, etc. And the amount of accomplishments you've done in one lifetime is mind-blowing. So it's going to be fun to get in here and kind of dive into a guy that makes this whole snowboard industry rad, like what you've done behind the scenes to make things like what they are now. It's awesome. So let's just start with where you're at now and what you're doing over at Powdr.
Well, I want to make one point of clarification, two points of clarification. First of all, at my age, I've forgotten half of that stuff you just mentioned. And then the other thing is marketing director at North Star. That's my wife, actually. Somehow, really? Yep. So Genevieve Gunnarson gets the credit there.
Let's give her an air horn for that.
Yep. The other stuff, I think that's all right. So where am I at today? I work for Powdr. Powdr is a adventure lifestyle company that has lots of different businesses around the country, several countries, mostly ski resorts. Obviously, the entire Woodward brand and portfolio. Powder Birds and the rafting company up in Oregon, but brands like businesses like Copper and Killington, Mount Bachelor, Eldora, Boreal. Silver Star up in Canada, which I haven't even been to yet because the day I was supposed to travel up there was the day we shut down for this pandemic. But my focus is mainly on Woodward, which we have, expressions of Woodward in lots of different ways. Obviously, the camp, that's got a 50-year history, right? 50 years, pretty big legacy there. The integration that we have at a lot of different of our resort properties. The newest expression of Woodward, which is Woodward Park City, which is really unlike any of our other businesses. Is it a ski resort? Not really. Is it a camp? No, but it has camp. It's kind of its own action sports explosion. And so, in my role running the Woodward Experience team through Powdr, it's really figuring out how we take this, interesting animal, this sort of legendary action sports brand of Woodward, which is all about inspiring and empowering the next generation of action sports, youth, families, everybody in between, and making it come to life in a lot of different locations, a lot of different ways, in a whole bunch of different sports. And so I get to, I sort of liken myself to the Disney Imagineering chief of all things Woodward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're kind of looking at everything from a bird's eye view, big picture, and not a ground level. Seeing how the chess pieces kind of are moving from a different level from where you're at. The playing field's a little different. I feel like it's just the overall big picture. Correct?
That's pretty much it. Yeah,
dude, I've been riding Woodward a ton, and think about the way we grew up, and the kind of. Like my local hill didn't even have a park really, as a kid. And now watching these kids that are, 10 years old doing backflips and it's just going to be unbelievable what that place does for the progression and just explosion of action sports. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, you're living right here in Utah where you can just pop right up there. What does it take? 25 minutes to get up there for you. Woodward Park City is, on that list of projects you mentioned, it's right at the top of, probably one of my most proudest projects I've worked on. It's kind of the culmination of everything that I've done through my entire career, and essentially master planning and working with an amazing team of people to help master plan and create this entirely new thing that's really unlike anything else that exists out there. It's got the terrain parks in the winter. We're building it out. It's got incredible mountain biking, sort of like no other. It's got the indoor facility with concrete, and we literally built the place to be able to shred every square inch of it from the time you come out of the parking lot, whatever your sport is. Trampolines, stuff to work on aerial awareness and balance and apply it to your sport, and obviously jumping into foam pits. And so, yeah, and we wanted to be a place where people actually feel like it's a community of action sports where you want to hang with like-minded people, and whether you're like really intensely focused on progressing your sport, we got it. Or if you just want to sort of hang and chill with your friends, we got that. So yeah, that's been an incredible project to work on.
Dude, yeah, I gotta give you an air horn for that, because I've been having a lot of fun. It's kind of I told this to Jeremy Jones, but the jump line there specifically kind of reinvigorated my love for snowboarding, how well they're built. And my personal favorite thing about the local Woodward here is it's a smaller hill. You don't have to go up any big canyon to get there. It's just kind of right off the highway. Takes me like 20 minutes to get there, and it's the experience of going to Woodward. I equate it more to going to the skate park. It's not this big operation. You show up, it's kind of loose, it's light, it's fun. You can spin laps for an hour and go down if you need to. It's not a huge commitment. Whereas sometimes when you go all the way up into the bigger mountains, you got to, wait, there's a huge parking lot. It's a whole excursion where, it takes like a whole day sometimes to go to some of the bigger mountains, where you can be like, I'm going to go spin laps for an hour and get my, get, as we like to say, get those reps up. We like having it convenient to get the reps up as snowboarders, So
I love hearing that. I love hearing that it reinvigorated your jump. I've been watching you up there. The very sleepy back 180s and doing a little laid back backflip. Yeah, I mean, I'll throw out an industry term for you guys called barrier of entry. It's something that the whole resort industry is very conscious of, and that if you have never been, put yourselves, the listeners, put yourself in the mindset of the first time you ever went to a mountain, right? Did you rent a board? Did you, how much did it cost? Was it a pain in the butt to get there? The drive, were you dealing with snow driving and that was new? Learning, it can be painful. There's a lot of things that would make somebody probably want to quit. And in fact, our retention rate, meaning like the amount of people who will come back a second time, is like 15%. So if they try skiing or snowboarding, 15% will come back. That's kind of the average. That's a terrible retention rate. And so we know that there's all these barriers of entry. And with Woodward Park City right off the highway, it's a little bit more affordable, great coaching. Everything is built on layers of progression, for whether you're, Shaun White training in the pipe, or your first time I've never set foot on snow. We want to make it as friendly and easy and small, least barriers of entry as possible.
Yeah, it's great. It's great in that regard. Now, one thing I kind of want to shift gears into, we don't really go in any particular order on this show. We just go where the conversation takes us. And I'm personally fascinated with and want to highlight the fact that you were there for the early days of park building, getting your start at Snow Summit, the early kind of evolution of snowboard parks. Fast forward, you're also there for the builds of the most world-class events like Peace Park and the X Games, and this kind of double decade of evolution of incredible features. And I guess you said a quote earlier in regards to Walt Disney that I thought encompassed, how you were able to level up the park building game. And I want to highlight that and see if you want to add anything to like kind of that evolution of park building.
Well, yeah. I think that the true pioneer of park building, really, that credit goes to Mike Perillo over at Bear. Let's give him a shout out. And a name that maybe some of the people don't know is just John Rice. And John Rice was, let's give him an air horn. John is a legend. He's one of my favorite people in the world. And he was running Bear Mountain at the time, and he was the guy that basically said, "It's okay, let's do this." Yeah. and Perillo, was building it out. I think, and then it was weird because the dynamic shifted. Perillo went off to do other stuff, and Snow Summit started to really dominate. And that had everything to do with the SoCal scene, right? A lot of the companies outside of maybe Burton and Lib were based in Southern California. Huge board sports culture there, surfers, skateboarders. And so Snow Summit and Big Bear Lake in general had just a huge, high number of snowboarders compared to the rest of the country by a lot. And so as the terrain park started to develop, it became a huge part of the business there. And just purely from an acreage standpoint, Snow Summit had a massive park. Even to this day, it's one of the from a sheer volume of features and square and acreage, it's one of the biggest parks there is, period. And so I was really proud to have a hand in that from really the beginning of that.
In the early 90s, I remember going there for the first time. Just mind-blowing, just seeing a whole resort that was pretty much a snowboard park. Hardly any skiers around, and it was kind of life-changing, really, as a snowboarder.
Well, I'll tell you, Dick Kuhn, rest in peace, one of my mentors, he owned Snow Summit. His family had started Snow Summit in 1952. Diehard skier. Really pushed his kids towards the ski race program. Really struggled with the fact that snowboarders were taking over his resort. And he was dead set on buying Bear Mountain specifically so he could take all of us and move us over to Bear. That's really kind of what that was all about. And so, both my wife and I were a heavy part of the executive team, if you will, at Snow Summit that helped sort of envision what that merger would look like, how we would swap those two brands a little bit. And that's why right around 2002, when I think that was the year that Snow Summit bought Bear Mountain, and now you had basically two resorts that had been heavy competitors for many, many years, all of a sudden became one thing. We called it Big Bear Mountain Resorts, and we shifted the whole youth focus over to Bear and made Summit more of the sort of family resort.
If you've watched the videos that are my little kind of Bibles of snowboarding, the early technical difficulties and 411 snows, like it's all footage from Snow Summit. And I never really, until I was doing my research to interview you for today, the light bulb never went off. Like, Gunny is the culprit behind making that happen, right? The liaison between the forum team and getting them to come shoot at Summit, correct?
Yeah, they used to joke. I did not say this, but they used to jokingly call me Forum 9 because I did ride for Forum. That was after Joyride, and those were my boys, like Steve Ruff, who was running the team, there we go. Was then and has always been one of my best friends. I was in his wedding. He was in my wedding. His cousin Rawl, who started first Special Blend and then later Foursquare, then Forum, was a close friend. And then Mike McIntyre, who owned a piece of Forum at the time. I worked with a ton during those days and in lots of years since then. And he's actually my brother-in-law. So let's give
one of those.
Big, like maybe even a gunshot.
Yeah, let's give him a gunshot. Yeah, absolutely.
Can we do that?
I like how he's requesting soundboards. That's phenomenal.
Do that? Dogger.
Do we have the technology?
So my wife is a twin, and her twin sister Catherine, who I love, of course, she's married to Dogger. And I did the 12-minute $15 ordainment online and married them at their house in Reno.
Oh, they're awesome.
That's incredible.
She's such a sweetheart too. Doing real snow stuff. Was in contact with her a lot. She's awesome.
Yeah.
And Dogger, absolute leyenda, as they say in Spanish. It's
leyenda.
Spanish for legend.
We've done a lot. We've done a lot of stuff with the Dog Father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, going back to, I'm going to highlight the Walt Disney quote that you said. I want you to try to reiterate. I asked you in the Patreon interview. We asked you. I believe it's words to live by,
or best advice.
Best advice ever received, and you said it was a Walt Disney quote.
Well, there's two. I gave you one earlier. I'm going to give you two right now. I hope I can remember them both. So one, and it has to do with what I consider to be craftsmanship and the need for more craftsmanship and how you take whatever you're doing in life and do it to the best of your ability. And Walt Disney's quote was, "Whatever you do, do it well. Do it so well that people will want to come and see you do it. And they'll want to come back and see you do it and bring their friends to see you do it." And it's a testament, and the way I look at that is is take a lot of pride in whatever you're doing, whether you're hosting a show or you're street snowboarding or you're building terrain parks or whatever your thing is. Even if you're cleaning bathrooms, do it so well that there's a level of pride and quality that people will appreciate. The second quote has to do more with being progressive and not staying complacent or stagnant. And it goes something like this. I can read it. I have it on my phone, but it's like, in this volatile world of ours, you can never rest on your laurels or even pause in retrospect. You must constantly keep your aim focused on the future. And I live by that one too, because, I've got about a 26, 28 year career. Almost 30, doing this kind of stuff. And the one thing I can tell you that's constant is change. The tricks change, the riders change, the environment changes, the level of support changes, the dynamics change. And so if you're not constantly staying in front of that and recognizing that change is inevitable, then you're going to get left behind.
Is that also a Walt Disney quote?
That's also, two great Walt Disney quotes.
You mentioned him a couple times. Have you studied Walt Disney a little bit, or just respect him?
Yeah.
Just a master, huh?
When I was a little kid, my dad had me buy one share of Disney stock, and then that let you go. They used to, I don't think they do this anymore, but they used to do shareholder day. And if you had one share, you could go there, and I'd wear my little suit, and you'd have Disneyland.
Because you were a shareholder.
I was a shareholder. Oh yeah, everyone did. And in fact, there's a funny story, side stories. I was showing my dad how I could open a ketchup packet with one hand and squirted this guy behind me, this whole suit. And my dad was horrified. But Walt Disney, that was a guy that had so much vision. And for him, it was all about the experience of entertaining people and bringing joy to people. And, even if you don't like Disneyland or you don't know who Walt Disney is, it's undeniable that as a behemoth entertainment company, they have focused on bringing joy to people through amazing experiences. And they've got this whole team called Imagineering that dreams up anything they do, right? In the beginning, that was made up of artists and engineers, animators for a lot of that Disney animation, which was a precursor to Disneyland and stuff like that. And so these are the people who came up with the ride development and the theming for the parks and sort of the vibe that you'd get going to Disney. And now it's a huge team that works around the whole world. And I have some friends that work for Disney Imagineering, and I've gotten to go behind the scenes and see how the sausage is made. And it's incredible what they do. And the biggest thing that I take away from that is that they so put that at the forefront over the cost or the money or the business, because they know that is their business. Their business is providing amazing experiences, and so they really let this creative team flourish. And I'm lucky in my role with Powdr and Woodward in that I've got this team, obviously much smaller than Disney Imagineering, but you've got these legends like Steve Swope, total BMX legend, ran Hoffman bikes with Matt Hoffman, was one of the original BMX guys in the X Games. Steve is our VP of Innovative Environments. So anything that we're going to build in concrete, snow, skate light, dirt, Steve is essentially the project manager of all those things across our whole portfolio. And he and I work closely together. And then we have Nate Wessel, another legendary BMX rider who is just such a talent, creative mind, design, and then build it. Woodward Park City, he had a massive hand, the biggest hand in a lot of the actual design of the interior, and then came in literally with bags on and welders and a huge crew, built that place. So, as far as physically building things and dreaming it up, when we work with a lot of different partners, like now S.P.T or California Skate Parks and companies like that sort of work hand in hand with our crew to build these experiences out. So we're like a little Disney Imagineering unit within Powdr to do awesome Woodward touch points, big and small, everywhere we can.
That's
cool.
completely fascinating too, to think about. What I'm almost thinking about is brand identity. It's a lot of times you think brand identity amongst your clothing or your logos, but you have the brand identity all the way through the details and how the skate park's laid out, how the BMX jumps are laid out. It's so cool to think about how well thought everything is from your guys' brand standpoint, all the way from top to bottom. It's inspiring in some ways. It's cool.
You have to think of it's like a brand identity of an experience, which is pretty cool.
Well, one pitfall in the early days of terrain parks that I've really applied, especially to Woodward, is in the early days it was very easy to migrate towards building big stuff, right? Because most of the guys that were designing or building it were really good riders, and were building it kind of for themselves, right? And their homies and the pros. And then the mistake in that is that you don't do anything to feed the pipeline of who's coming up next. And so I created this thing we call the Woodward Intuitive Progression System, or W.I.P.S. And it's basically a 10-point scale. It's 11 points, 0 through 10. 0 is I have never stepped foot on a snowboard or skis or BMX bike or whatever, skateboard. And 10 is, the highest level at the sport. And we literally have these kind of visuals mapped out where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. And we're saying to ourselves, are we actually doing as good of a job on a 3 as we are on a 10? Are we doing as good of a job on a 0 in the start park or something like that as we are on an 8? And so there's been this, one of our barriers to entry has been historically like, I'm not good enough to go to Woodward. Not necessarily Woodward Park City, but just kind of
Keep it rolling.
started more with kind of Woodward. So it's falling apart as I'm laying down these words. There's this feeling like I can't go to Woodward, PA. I'm just not good enough a skateboarder. My kids are like that. My 2 daughters, and we're trying to break that down because we want everyone to be able to go there. I want more people to get into these sports. I want people to feel like this is a safe, easy place to learn, and they can do it right alongside someone like Ryan Sheckler or Jeremy Jones. And so I think that's what you were referring to, Chris, as far as this sort of like whole system and how it works together.
You want to make sure you're not judged either as a little kid coming in there.
Totally. And so like, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but when you're at Woodward Park City and you go up the chair, the big jump line is right next to the chair, right?
Yep.
But the smaller stuff is further away.
Yep.
And we did that by design. Part of that was topography, but part of it was that we don't want this intimidation factor where you feel like you're under the magnifying scope and you're being judged. And so let the rippers who can rip show off right next to the chair in full view, and that's a pretty good entertainment spectacle. And let the people who are still working it out do it a little further away where they don't feel heavy pressure.
That's so
it's
smart.
Genius. So right now where you guys are at, you're executing like giant visionary just feats, making things come to life. But I want to back it up because it seems like you got your start with the people coming to you saying, hey, I want to conceptualize this event, I want to do this thing. Was the Nixon Jib Fest the beginning of that, or is there anything precursors to that? Or let's talk about those early days of people coming to you saying, "Let's execute some events."
Okay, on the event side, there's a whole history kind of prior to that, but on the event side, at least in my my journey, the two things. In fact, that's why I brought in this 1997 first Winter X Games medal, because it says Snow Summit and it says Winter X Games. That was the first time. And that event, X Games was in its infancy. There I was running the park at Snow Summit. And so when they came in, it was like, oh, by default, you're going to be the guy building all these courses. And so that was so new. There's a whole history that happened from there. But I think that for me, that was really a launching pad, and that that became both a passion and a business that stemmed from those two things. Being at Snow Summit in that hotbed of Southern California board sport culture, and then the launch of the X Games. As far as, then fast forward a little bit, only a couple of years to Nixon Jib Fest. What made that so cool and different from something like the X Games is that was truly a rider-driven project supported by a very cool brand like Nixon, that was all about like, hey, we don't need to like come in and tell you, we don't have this like preconceived idea of what it ought to be. Let's let the riders figure it out. And so that was really JP, Jeremy, Dave Downing, handful of others, but those three were really kind of the three chiefs. And then my job was to sort of, I don't want to condescendingly say ground them in reality, but be like, okay, these are all great ideas. Let's figure out logistically, can we do all these things, and what's it look like, and in how much time, and what's going to cost to put this together. And so, it's funny. Like, I like to believe I'm a very creative guy, But I end up having to be sometimes the creative stifler or just like the reality check on stuff, which is very similar to how it works with Danny when we're working on Peace Park stuff, because he's got no shortage of awesome ideas. So it always like kind of, pains my heart a little bit, and that as the creative guy, I have to be the one that like calms things down a little bit sometimes. But that's just so that we can execute. You want to be able to execute as well as you possibly can, given variable conditions and financial realities and operational realities and stuff like that. So it's a happy marriage of creativity and reality.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's beautiful. Going back to like the arc of your career here, you end up by the end. But we can get into exactly what S.P.T is and was and does and how you started that. But you went from basically, it kind of looked like you worked your way up from smaller events to bigger to taking on more, to the fact of eventually Shaun White saying, I need a private half pipe, build this. Like, what I'm wondering is, how did you get the confidence to take these logistical nightmare of events with so many moving parts and say, yeah, we can do that. Let's make it happen. How does that like, because I look at where you're at, and some of these things seem like unfathomable to manage this many moving parts. Like, where do you gain that confidence from?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's fully recognizing it is always a team effort. But any team has to have a team leader, right? And you have to know what your objectives are. It's funny, I was mentioning Disney Imagineering earlier, that if there's two organizations that couldn't be any more different, that I've really studied and gotten to know different people in those organizations, it's the Disney and Imagineering crew, and it's the Navy SEALs. I grew up in Coronado, which is kind of where SEALs are born, and I have some friends that are in that world. They're obviously about never quit, never fail, and always deliver, execute. Executable, sometimes incredibly difficult logistical planning. With the Imagineering, it's creativity and entertainment factor, but it's also executing with sometimes very difficult logistical planning. For me, and I try and draw inspiration anywhere and everywhere I can, but focus first on, the people that you're around, and that, I would say that the team and the people I worked with throughout my whole career have more to do with, I guess, success than anything else. But I also live by this sort of PIP are my three acronyms. So it's passion, it's integrity, and it's perseverance. So passion for what you do and like really loving what you do, because then you're going to pour everything you got into it. Integrity, and Steve Ruff always has called me Mr. Reliable. I don't say that. He says that, but having a reputation for actually coming through, or at least giving it everything you can to come through the best you possibly can, sometimes in situations where the outcome can't be as good as you want it to be. And then finally, perseverance is just that kind of never quit and try not to ever fail. Don't ever let people tell you can't do it. That's been a big one for me my whole life, even before I got into what I'm doing from a career standpoint.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear where you pull your inspiration from too. That combination of visionaries and discipline is fascinating. I know that I'm a avid reader, and I have a guest question from Chad, the founder of Nixon, right here, who is an incredible human. Here we go.
Hello, Bombhole. This is Chad Denena, and I've got a question for Chris Gunnarson. Chris, you're a voracious reader. What are your 3 recommended reads for the Bombhole listeners?
Wow. Well, it's Chad's right. By the way, Chad, how about a gunshot for Chad?
Let's give him
one of my longest time homies. Love that guy like no other. The 3 reads. I better think of something profound. I like reading a lot of fiction, and I'll try and blend it with books you can kind of more learn about how you improve yourself or your career or whatever. Creativity Inc. is a book that I literally carry with me everywhere, and it's so dog-eared and has notes and sticky tabs and everything in it. Creativity Inc. was written by a guy named Ed Catmull. He was the president of Pixar, pre-Disney. And then post-Disney. And the 3 guys that created Pixar, by the way, were Steve Jobs from Apple. He was the money and kind of brains behind it initially. Ed Catmull, who wanted to be an animator, but he wasn't a great animator, but he turned out to be a really great leader of a company and of creative people, which is what the book is about. And then the third person is John Lasseter, who was like literally dreamed up this, the entire, and wrote the entire story for Cars or Toy Story and Monsters Inc. and like literally every Pixar movie. And I actually, funny side story, when I lived in Tahoe, my neighbor across the street from me, she always used to bring me these Pixar toys for my kids. Like, oh, here, I got this latest batch of toys for my brother. And finally one day I'm like, what's your brother do at Pixar? I'm a big Pixar fan. She's like, oh, he like runs it. I'm like, what do you mean he runs it? And then her twin brother was John Lasseter. He actually got me when I was doing Burton did an activation with Star Wars for a while. And we were going to build this Burton Star Wars park, Riglet Park, out at Sierra Tahoe, and through my neighbor, he connected me with the Imagineering team out in Florida, and I went to Disney World, and I'll never forget the email, and I saved it. It's from John Lasseter, who's like number 3 at all of Disney once they bought Pixar, had written this letter to the guy that's like the senior vice president of ride development for all of Disney, and it was like, hey, this guy Chris Gunnarson is like the John Lasseter of the ski resort industry. Can you host him out in Orlando? And I was like, oh, I'm the John Lasseter. Wow, that's great. So sorry. Let's get back to the topic. Long tangent. Creativity Inc. is a book about managing creative people who are sometimes hard to manage or can't stay always on task or focused. Great lesson book for me. Another book would be Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. All of his books are great. I have a good story about how I got that book. That was a dinner with Shaun White one night, and he was like, hey, have you read this book, Outliers? And he kind of told me about the book, so of course I went and I bought it, and obviously somebody had given it to him because they were like, hey, what made you an outlier? It's the story of what made one single person like so much better than everybody else in their profession. Bill Gates is each chapter is a different story, and it starts actually with the Canadian national hockey team, and a lot of it has to do with the timing, luck, personal aptitude, advancement, and where you were born, and all these different factors coming together. And what's interesting for the way I look at that book is it's like the greatest parenting book, and it has nothing to do with parenting. Right. But the what I took away from that book is that the reason some of these people found their thing in life that they became so good at was because they were exposed to so many different things. And so as a parent, I try and allow my kids to experience as many different things. Some they're going to fail at, some they're not going to be interested in, but they might find that one thing that they love, and that sets them on their path to their own personal success. So I'd say the two books, Outliers and Creativity Inc. And then I'll throw in this great Kurt Vonnegut book called Cat's Cradle, which is just a killer book.
They make us read that in school?
I didn't in my school.
Vonnegut, I remember
Vonnegut's a great writer.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorites. I'll throw in the honorable mention to the book Fight Club or anything by Chuck Palahniuk.
I imagine the book's way better than the movie, and the movie's one of my favorites.
I think Chuck Palahniuk is quoted saying he actually thought the movie was better than the book.
Really?
But I'd say they were both equally amazing. It is also one of my favorites.
That movie's amazing.
So good, right?
Yeah.
Gonna go back to Outliers though. I definitely gonna pick that up, and on this podcast, even hearing you describe what the book's about, we get nerdy. I like to be a fucking nerd on here sometimes and like dissect our guests. Like, okay, you've done these incredible passion projects. Like, what are the things that you do differently in your life that I can take and apply? Like, that's what I want to. That's why I love having you in this chair. Like, even I'm like, okay, you read Outliers, boom, I'm gonna do that. Like, what you could see us doing it with a lot of our guests. So, thanks for sharing that info.
What I'm wondering is what made you back in the early days of your career become the guy that everybody went to? Because there was a lot of other park builders at the time, right?
Well, I don't know if there's a lot of park builders, but what made me the guy? I think that I think it's going to come back to the third P in my PIP, which is perseverance. I'll tell you a quick story of how I got a job at Snow Summit. I call it climbing the mountain, but I had, through a friend, had got a contact to go up and get an interview for prior to the job fair. Every year around kind of Halloween time, there's this job fair of hiring. And there was this job called Snowboard Awareness, and it was part of Ski Patrol. And looking back on it now, it's pretty interesting. Snow Summit had this philosophy of like, oh my God, we're getting overrun by all these snowboarders. They don't come from the ski world, so they don't know the skier responsibility code, and they're a hazard on the hill. Let's hire people that are like them or are them, who can like communicate with them and try and encourage them to be a little bit more responsible on the hill. So that's why I was part of Ski Patrol. So I go up there for this job interview, and I went a week early, and I met the guy. His name was Terry McDonald. He passed away recently. Terry, well, maybe gunshot for Terry.
Give him an air horn.
And so he's like, great. And he got my application, and he's like, come back next week and we'll get it all squared away. So I come back next week, and he literally is like, I've never met you before. I was like, no, I remember last week I was in your office. He's like, no, I never would meet someone before the job fair. And I'm like, but we just met last week. Nope, no way. And then I see on the wall in his office, I'm like, well, there's my application. He was like, oh yeah. And I think maybe I had like blue hair or something at the time. So he was probably like, he goes, well, listen, the person really interviewing for the job, she's at the top of chair 1. We're doing a mountain bike race. You're going to have to go up there and meet with her. So I was like, okay. And I'd kind of dress nice. I'm in a button down shirt and, not slacks, but like nice jeans and Doc Martens. And so I go to the lift, and they're running a mountain bike race. And I'm like, hey, I'm supposed to go for an interview at the top. And they're like, well, where's your lift ticket? And it's not like I'm trying to poach mountain biking. I'm in a freaking, interview shirt. And I said, well, I don't have a lift ticket. And they're like, well, then, get on the chairlift. So I start walking. So I walk to the top of the mountain. And when I get there, this woman, Phyllis, she was the one doing the hiring. And I show up, and I'm sweaty and dusty from that hike. And so it's not a huge mountain, but that's a hike.
That's a hike, yeah.
To the top, from the bottom base area to the top. And so she says, we've already filled all the positions. And I said, okay. And she's like, how did you get here? I said, well, I hiked up here. And she goes, why? And I told her the story. And she's like, well, I'm going to create another position because anybody who will climb this mountain to get this job deserves it.
Perseverance.
So that's perseverance. That's how I got that job.
That's a beautiful story.
That is a beautiful story. And a lot of people that sit in that chair have a story like that to why they've gotten to where they've gotten. And
not taking no for an answer.
Yeah, you don't take no.
But that didn't fully answer your question. The guy, I think, and this would be a good lesson for anybody that's looking to be in this industry, is that, once I started actually working, so like a lot of people, I wanted to be a pro snowboarder. That was my thing. I was kind of sponsored at the time. I was starting to do some competitions and stuff. I thought it was kind of hot shit. But I really fell in love with the resort operations, and I wanted to become a student of everything. I wanted to learn about risk management. I wanted to learn about marketing. I wanted to learn about grooming. I didn't set out to be this the best park builder in the world, but I knew that I had ideas, and that in order to execute those ideas, I'd need to learn how to drive a snowcat. So I became pretty fucking good at driving a snowcat, and I wanted to absorb as much knowledge, because if you stay in just one lane with a single track mind, you're going to be pretty limited. And I wanted to understand every aspect of the business, because there's a famous saying, the first rule of business is stay in business. And so, in those days, terrain parks were so new. You guys are probably a lot of listeners are probably too young to remember this, but skate parks in California had basically disappeared in that era. So late 80s, early 90s, because of lawsuits, liability, too high of insurance premiums, and they all went away. And I was starting to realize, my dad taught law, and he was like, oh, you're in a pretty risky business with all this stuff. And so I wanted to figure out, what could we do operationally? What could we do from a informational standpoint to lessen the risk as much as possible? So it was a combination of those things, plus really quality built, thoughtful terrain park process. And so that was one of many things I tried to apply to the overall process. And so my advice has always been to, aspiring park builders or terrain park managers is gain as much knowledge as you can, not just in your lane. It's not about snowmaking and snowcats and pros. It's about understanding every aspect of the business so you can be the biggest benefit to your business.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hey, Buds, you know what? It could be a good time to pay the bills right now.
Let's pay them bills, son.
So we're going to get into the breakout moment, which is presented by Pub Beer. Now, it's summertime. People are camping. They're having a good time. They're crushing cans, if you will. If you're looking to drink a couple beers, get yourself some Pub Beer.
It's a great way to beat the heat, huh?
And their tagline is what, Buds?
Cheap, fun beer.
That it is. Now, I got a question for you, Gunny. Do you have a moment in your career that is kind of a breakout moment where you got your shine in what you do now?
Yeah, I feel like there's just been so many. I'll play to your heartstrings a little bit, and it relates to hockey.
Let's go.
Okay, so a lot of people may not know this, but in the very, very early days of the X Games, ESPN had all these different people on contract, and all of a sudden they had this thing called the X Games. And so they would pull in different people. They had Bart Connors, the Olympic gymnast, was the big air snowboard announcer, which was year one, which was hilarious and terrible. And you had all these kind of big wheel stick and ball sports guys that are coming in to do production and directing and all this stuff. And one guy, Doug Holmes, I haven't talked to him in a while, but fabulous guy. He was the head of all hockey for ESPN. And, I don't want to talk shit, but I would say that a lot of the ESPN people, A, thought they were pretty fucking awesome, which I guess they were, and B, thought that this new X Games things was almost like a joke to them. Like, seriously, I go and do NFL football games and, NCAA, March Madness, and now I've got to do this, like these sports with these kids on toys flipping around and doing stuff. But Doug was the one guy that was like, he pulled me aside and he's like, hey, man, I don't know anything about snowboarding. I don't know where to put my cameras. I don't know what tricks they're going to do. I don't know. You got to be my right-hand guy. Can you help guide me through this so we can do the best possible show? And I thought that was a pivotal moment in that as big time as he was really willing to learn so that he could put out the best possible show. And I think he and another guy, Phil Orlins, who was the head producer, get a lot of credit for what could have been a really bad display of action sports and snowboarding and setting it on the right path. Phil was the one who called me and was like, we can't be doing the Bart Connors thing anymore. Like, are there credible people out there who do this? And I was like, well, my buddy Salemo Masekela is, he already announces some of the stuff. How about and so, he gets in touch with Salema and then, look at that run. Todd won the first X Games in pipe. And then later became an announcer. But I think that was a pivotal moment just and good for me to see that even somebody, an expert in their world, was really willing to learn our world and do it as well as they could. Doug Holmes.
That's a pivotal moment for snowboarding as a whole. I never could have, for the mainstream to be able to embrace it. If you produce that show wrong, X Games doesn't exist. Snowboarding doesn't get to the level it is now. That's
it could have been a big joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
And never got off the ground.
He also brought me down to several Western Conference Finals games where I got to work on the ice and do stuff like that.
You've told me a story about tell the story about when you're wielding. They bring the cameras on.
Yeah. So I'm a big Detroit Red Wings fan, and Red Wings were playing the Wings in the brand new Staples Center. It was soon to be the home of the Summer X Games, where I'd worked there a ton in the summer, which was killer. But I think it was the first or second year that the Staples Center was even open, and it's Kings Wings. Wings are up 3-0. I'm at game 4. I'd been to game 2, and then I went to 4. And Doug's like, "Hey, I'm going to give you a working pass. And I'm going to give you a job. And here's the job. If the Wings are winning in the third period, you're going to go out on the ice with the camera guy and do the post-game interview. If they're not winning, you don't have to do anything." So the whole game, I'm in the locker room. I'm hanging at the bench. I'm going wherever I can with my big ESPN credential and talking to Chris Osgood and a bunch of the players. I wanted to meet Fedorov, but I didn't. But they're winning. They're up 4-0. I walk my way across behind the bag to get to so there's in between the boxes, right? You got the home team and the visiting team, and in between there's a glass box, and that's the camera guy who's on the ice the whole game. He's the guy that I'm supposed to meet with, right? And I'm supposed to follow him out. I'm going to be his cable puller, right? Meaning this cable. I'm going to like make sure that he's all good as he goes out onto the ice. Game ends. First he looks at me with like 20 seconds to go and he's like, "You my puller?" And I'm like, "Yep." And he goes, "Don't fuck up." I'm like, "Okay." "Oh, you got it." And I'm in like skate shoes, right? Terrible planning. So game ends, confetti comes out of the ceiling, lights go crazy. Homeboy runs out of his thing, and his whole bundle of cable that I'm holding just rat nests instantly. And I'm like, and the skate, the wings are like circling the ice, and hands in the air. And I'm like trying to untangle this bundle of cable, and I almost tripped Steve Eiserman. Like he literally like has to like jump.
Golden air of the wings.
Oh, and so I was like horrified, but I was on the ice for that win, and then they went and won the Stanley Cup. So you also kind of need to stay in your lane at times, and I blew that one.
That's awesome. So let's talk about Snow Park Technologies. It is turned into just an absolute juggernaut. It's bigger than terrain park industry. It's even an event business as well. The whole thing. But let's talk about like where you're at when you started. What is it, and what it's become, and everything else in between.
So the whole reason that S.P.T even started was because year 2 of the Winter X Games was going now to Crested Butte, right? Year 1 was at Snow Summit, and then the next 2 years were at Crested Butte. And they needed somebody to design and build the courses. And they were like, "Hey, you did it for the first year. Like, why don't you come and do this other one?" Meanwhile, they were doing the Summer X Games, which at the time had a big air scaffold jump. And they asked me to come down and work on that. Yeah, which was a total fiasco. Barely happened. And that was in San Diego. But, my dad, as I mentioned earlier, he taught law, and he was like, "Hey, if you're going to be going out and like designing stuff and all these professional athletes are going to compete on it, you really ought to, you need to create a corporation and a shell. You need to get insurance and all this stuff." So I was learning about that. And so Mike Bonnell, who was my original partner, and he was like the main groomer at Snow Summit, main park groomer. He and I were, partners in crime. We formed this entity. I remember we were sitting in a hotel room, like, what should we call it? And we just called it Snow Park Technologies. And really quickly, at the same time as the event thing was happening, also resorts around the country and the world were also trying to figure out, like, hey, we probably need a terrain park. And so we kind of grew 2 pieces of that business at once. One was very specifically resort terrain parks, and one was very specifically events. And so all at once we were doing, going to Japan and China and Europe and all over the U.S. and working with, Colorado and East Coast and on resort work. And then Van's Triple Crown, which was a thing at the time, was an awesome event series, which I wish would come back. But, that was a 3-stop series that kind of became the Dew Tour sort of later on. I mean, the Dew Tour was separate, but it replicated a lot of those stops in a multi-stop series. Nixon Jib Fest. And so, the idea was to be this kind of end-to-end design, build, functioning company to do that. Now, over time, a pivotal thing that happened and why we sort of stopped calling it Snow Park Technologies and really just moved to S.P.T is that about 10 years into maybe a little less than 10 years into the X Games, they needed a sport organizer. And so the way X Games works, which I think is still a really great model, is that in each sport that they're in, BMX, moto, snowboarding, skiing, there's a sport organizer who's essentially the conduit between ESPN, which is a media company, and then the actual competition. So when you're the sport organizer, you're in charge of who are the athletes, what's the competition format, what are the judging rules, hiring the judges, all that stuff. And ESPN asked me to be the sport organizer for snowboarding. And so now suddenly it wasn't just building courses, it was doing the sport organizing piece. And then around that same time, they needed more help on sort of the operational logistics with what they call athlete hospitality and sport sort of sport operations for the summer X Games. So suddenly we were doing summer and winter X Games, sport organizing. We started doing more of operational logistics, even on the mountain and off the mountain. And so S.P.T started doing a lot more than that. And then Real Snow came along to follow Real Skate or Real Street, and then Real Snow Backcountry, and then Real Moto. And so pretty soon S.P.T was doing, that was just the X Games, but we were doing similar stuff later with Do Tour and with eventually Nitro World Games and stuff in, foreign countries. And so S.P.T kind of became a full service action sports little boutique company.
It's almost, I'm thinking like in terms of construction, it's like a GC of in some senses of like, oh, you need an event. We can get the rider's tent going for you. We'll build the park for you. We'll do, it's like, it's just logistically is just unbelievable what you guys have been able to do.
And again, it goes back to like having the right team of people, either the ones that were working directly for S.P.T or the very extended family of people that we'd work with on all these different projects. Like X Games had so many employees working on each of those two, summer and winter projects. And we'd work with, I think it's something like 15 departments, and each department had who knows how many people. And there's just so much logistical coordination that I think the GC thing is probably a pretty good analogy.
Well, one thing I want to touch on too, you think about the average snowboarder, maybe they think of this, maybe they don't, but an average snowboarder rolls, if they're riding the park, they show up, there's a snowboard park that is just fucking built. Like they're just like, oh, there's a park there, but I want to take this time on this podcast to give a super air horn to all of the terrain park builders out there, the shapers, the people raking with the rake in their hands, because you show up to a park, they were up all night setting rails, they're up all night in the cat, they're grooming it every day, and I do feel as though the snowboard park groomers, builders, however you want to call it, are kind of the unsung heroes of snowboarding. Like everybody else gets pretty good shine, and they're kind of, I don't know if they get you. I mean, you guys, not as much as you're in the cat anymore, but I don't think that the builders get the credit they deserve in this industry.
Yeah, amen to that. And I'll say this: like anything, you get the good with the bad. Driving a snowcat and building stuff that you're going to go and ride is really fun. It's like playing a big video game that you can do massive destruction or massive creativity all at once. It's a ton of fun. Getting heavy criticism and feedback on the daily from the people that maybe don't realize how much effort that went into it is not that fun. And I've gotten that at all levels. Like, my own brother-in-law, Dogger, he was the harshest of all critics. And Jeremy talked about it on his bomb hole. Dogger would call me like, hey, how are the conditions down there? And I'd be like, oh, it's so good. And he'd show up and be like, really? I came down for this? Like,
just a bunch of prima donnas.
Yeah. These jumps aren't even big enough to have Peter Line hit. And I'd be like,
I got a perfect question. I'm going to stop you there because we got a guest question from our boy Todd Richards along these lines. Here we go.
Hey, Bombhole, Todd Richards here. I've got a question for my good buddy Gunny. Hey, Gunny, you've been responsible for parks and pipes and putting together world-class competitive venues for years and years and years. So over that time span, who has been the whiniest person about jumps or half pipes or anything like that in the past? Who's the guy that complains the most about the setups? All right. Look forward to your answer. Love the podcast. Talk to you guys later. See ya.
Oh,
Great question.
That's the guy from Out Cold, right?
Yeah, I think he was seen in Out Cold.
Barry. It's Barry from Out Cold, right?
Barry from Out Cold.
Oh man, this could take us down some bad paths.
We like those
you can't
paths.
Louis Vito this.
Yeah.
Louis Vito, you ask him questions. He's an expert at dodging.
He does the Matrix.
He's like
He's smooth.
He's professionally trained. He's classically trained. You could say it.
We want to hear names.
We need somebody's name. We need names.
In the early days, like I know Todd already, he knows exactly who I'm going to say. Jimmy Scott was definitely
Jimmy
lame.
Scott, huh?
Yeah.
Jimmy Scott would come at you hard.
I almost got into a fight with Jimmy Scott, and it wasn't even about park building. He was there's one of the most famous jumps at Snow Summit was called the light pole hit, and you had to bomb it from the top to hit it. And right before it's a hip, right? I'm goofy, so it's a front side hip, and you had to bomb it literally from the top of the mountain if you want to really get a good air on it. And the last little run-in was a knoll that you'd pre-ollie to get like your last little bit of juice before you'd hit this thing. And I come over that pre-ollie, and there's a guy and a girl like right there, and they were blind, and I literally, Oh, did I just jack my mic? I literally like pencil up and go right between them.
Whoa.
And I hit the jump. And I land, and he comes rolling up, and I kind of knew him, and he was just like, I'm Jimmy Scott, and you just cut me and my girlfriend off, and I'm trying to teach her how to snowboard. And I was like, well, maybe you shouldn't teach her in a blind spot in front of a jump. And he did not like that, and it got pretty ugly. And then my manager at the time, he's the mountain manager of the mountain, Carl Klauser, he rolls up on a snowmobile and sort of sees us, and I had to cool it way down. But I was a little fired up. But he was sort of famous for that. I'm gonna give him both. I'm gonna give him a little heat and big props at the same time. Torstein is one of the heaviest critics, but he's also usually right, and he's willing to like get out there with a shovel and really like sit in the cat for hours. And so he'd be a pretty harsh critic on stuff, and it would be generally pretty right.
He knew what he wanted, huh?
Yeah, and he, look what he did.
Yeah, that mechanical brain that it's already, the math equation's already made up in his head, and he knows what he wants.
Yeah, but I think I try and focus on the positive, and this isn't trying to Louis Vito my way out of this one. Sorry, Louis, but I think for the most part, like Mark McMorris is definitely has a very specific idea of what he wants, but he wants it right. Shaun, but there's two guys I have enormous respect for. Shaun's a heavy critic of like if the pipe's not perfect. And there's two ways you can take that. One is like, hey, did you see the ditches guys like, Kidwell and Salaz and those guys used to deal with, and you're complaining about this thing that's a sculpted work of art because it's off by a half a degree. The other way to look at it is those guys weren't going 22 feet out of a pipe, an icy pipe wall, doing, double McTwists and crazy tricks. And so the consequences are just so much higher, and you need to have as good of a platform for them as possible. And so I don't begrudge anybody who's critical, as long as they're willing to be constructive in how we can make it better. It's just the haters that sort of rally everyone like, this sucks, and everyone's like, yeah, this totally sucks, and it really doesn't suck that bad. Mm-hmm. I got no time for that.
That makes sense.
In your words, I believe you said, I got to see how the sausage is made, which is kind of what we're doing on this show in behind the scenes of events and things like that. And so, you talked about off-air riders meetings. I thought that was kind of the environment of a riders meeting where you show up and some people think the jump's great, other people hate it, and vice versa. Do you want to describe that kind of scene before an event? Yeah, so typically you'll have a riders meeting. It'll be usually after the first practice session. So let's take it. It could be the U.S. Open, it could be Dew Tour, it could be X Games, it could be whatever. But let's take an X Games rider meeting because I would host a lot of those. And you've worked for 3 weeks to a month physically building after 6 months to a year of planning, and all this incredible amount of effort has gone into this course or a series of courses. And now the world's best athletes have shown up, and you hold a rider meeting. And really the purpose of the rider meeting is communication, and let's talk about the formats and who's judging and what they're looking for. And, and by the way, everybody just hit the course, like any feedback. And then there's like 50 hands that all go up. And it turns into sort of a free for all of criticism on what could be better. And that's a hard thing to take, but at the same time, like I was saying, these are the world's best athletes on the world's biggest stage. They want to perform the best they can, and so they're really looking for how to best set themselves up for success, and they're going to be putting their lives and bodies on the line. And so you just got to hear that out and do everything you can to make it as good as it can be.
I have a Patreon question along the lines that what we're talking about. This is from Hugs. What is the perfect radius for building jumps and quarters and half pipes on snow? Is that such a thing?
No, because it changes depending on what feature you're building. And it's a great question. If I had a physics engineering degree, I could probably tell you a formula that would minimize. Here's what I know. Typically for a takeoff, you would want a jump takeoff. You would want a takeoff that doesn't promote more than 2 Gs of force for the intended distance that you're hitting and the required speed, right? So actually jump physics are really simple. It's like ballistics. It's like a bullet will drop over time with depending on the arc of the takeoff the angle of the takeoff, the speed that you're going, and how gravity is going to pull you back down. And so every jump is different. If it's a small jump, the radius is going to be smaller. If it's a really big jump, that requires a ton of speed, it's going to be a lot bigger. Who I've talked a lot about this with is Ken Block, because on an even bigger scale, I've helped design a lot of the jumps that he would do in his car, where you're not jumping like 50 or 60 feet, you're jumping like 150 feet.
There's no room for error, right?
There's no room for error.
Yeah, error means he's getting hurt.
Yeah, and so there's the radius will change with that. In skateboarding and even BMX, there's a little bit more concrete because concrete radius shapes that you'd want to go with because, skateboard has a much smaller wheelbase than a snowboard's effective edge, and BMX bike reacts differently, and so there's more sort of precedent there because the speeds are pretty similar. Mega Ramp with Danny Way changed all that for skateboarding and really, in some ways, emulated snowboarding a little bit in terms of that's such a big jump for a skateboard compared to what skateboarders were used to. Danny, in fact, called me, this is years ago, but after the Mega Ramp was really turning into a thing and was like, X Games Big Air competition in summer, and he wanted to build literally a slope style, which now we've seen like Elliott Sloan has kind of done that. Mm-hmm. But Danny had this property in Kauai, and he had a big plan to build like literally a skateboard slope style course and wanted my help on it. And I was like, obviously I was very honored. Like, I think Danny Way is, in a league of his own, and he's crazy, right? In a good way usually. But I thought that was such a cool project. And he wanted to talk about like a rope toe and that, like angles and degrees and how big to make stuff and how much speed you would get and everything like that. It was a pretty cool conversation. Didn't quite happen all the way. He did build that big quarter out there and on that property. When you're building a giant jump, is it more about feeling then, an eye, and just knowing? Initially it is, but then, today at the level it's at now, there's definitely some measurement that goes on, and we have industry best practices. So you know what works. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, going back to some of the courses you built, I always ride do tour every year and ride the slopestyle course, and it's when you watch an X Games or do tour on TV, or you see these guys doing the tricks, the jumps are so goddamn perfect. And although if you get comfortable, just the only thing you have to be comfortable with is just going fast as fuck at a jump. Like, you're just going fast. But once you hit it, it's got these long drawn out takeoffs that I love, like, when you hit the conversation about G-forces, there's no real G-forces going in. And it's got these touchdown landings where you can land anywhere from right over the knuckle to 40 feet down and you're good. And so it's got this, like, they're big and they're safe, and a big part of those guys being able to do switchback 16s is because of these guys sitting there mastering their craft in the snowcat too, which is something that goes unnoticed sometimes.
What's scary to me is the landing. I mean, there was a period of time where I thought I was pretty darn good at snowboarding, and there's probably a period of time where I might have been like the rippingest dude on the mountain for a little bit, but I'll go ride like the U.S. Open course. That's a steep course, or when it was at Vail, that's a course where you're hanging on, right? I love it because it's like the U.S. Open of golf, where it's as difficult as it gets. Those landings are so long. Like, I'll stand at the knuckle and then I'll ride down one, and I'm like, my eyes are tearing, even I'm wearing goggles, and you're like, how are people landing huge tricks off of this? Like, it is frightening. And then the light gets flat and the conditions get very firm. I have such respect for all those athletes, and like, look at the level on the women's riding these days too, where my mind is, but if you actually ride down, just cruise down one of those courses, and then you watch those athletes, huge respect.
Sidebar question. We asked who the biggest pain in the ass is. Who is the chillest athlete about the course?
Chillest? I mean, I don't know. Some of my colleagues probably, and now S.P.T, that they're on their, that I've like a bird out of the nest. They are now on their own. I'm no longer part of that. They might have some difference of opinions on this, but I think probably one of my favorite athletes to work with, and maybe one of my all-time favorite just snowboarders, period, is Jamie Anderson.
Nice.
doing it for all the right reasons. I mean, look at three-time Olympic gold medalist. She just keeps it so real. She's so good.
Down to earth.
And she's so down to earth.
Yeah.
And she's usually got this attitude. I've watched it where if it's an 8-women field, 7 are saying, we don't want to do this. And she literally will say in a writer's meeting, like, you're all a bunch of bitches. Like, let's do this. We came here to do this. We're going to make the sport look bad. I'll be the only one to go if that's what it takes. And then
everyone's going to go.
Maybe half. You know, there's been occasions where like half went. She's so gnarly. She's so consistent.
She deserves all that she's gotten and all she's done.
And I've known her since she competed. Her first X Games event was she was 13. She was competing in border cross and pipe at the same time. And her older sister Joni was also competing in, I think, border cross. So I've known Jamie since she was really little. She grew up at Sierra Tahoe. John Rice, who I mentioned earlier, has been like a real kind of father figure mentor for her in terms of her career and supporting her. And I just love the fact that she's stayed true with Sierra Tahoe. She's just stayed true to who she is, despite, huge fame, spotlight, so many gold medals. She to me sort of represents what snowboarding ought to be about. She's disciplined and focused when it's necessary. She wins when it's necessary, which is all the time. And she's just so cool.
And she never kind of like put herself in her own category where she's bigger than snowboarding. I always liked, she treats the local kid on the hill the same as the sponsored kid, the same as she's just like a border to her core, as opposed to like sometimes people elevate themselves out of put them on a different playing field at times, I guess you could say.
She loves the sport and she loves giving back to it. Yeah, she's class act, that lady.
All right, buds, I think it might be time for you know what.
Liquid Death. Spinning wheel.
To the Liquid Death.
Death. Spinning wheel of
It's Mikey LeBlanc's voice, by the way.
Nice, of course.
So Liquid Death is an absolutely hydrating beverage. It looks like a beer, but it's just water. Mountain spring water. What's good about Liquid Death, buds?
It's from the Alps. It's fresh. And, it really helps you murder your thirst.
Yeah. You don't need to murder people.
Just your thirst.
Just your thirst.
And it's been a hot summer. It's nice to stay hydrated out there.
Absolutely. You don't have to get a DUI with this thing.
No.
You just drink water and be hydrated.
If the cop thinks it's a beer, just pound it in front of him and show him the can after.
Mm-hmm.
Styx has sent me some Liquid Death, and I have that same concern. It looks like an oldie.
It does look exactly like the same text, I think.
You're driving along, like, looking around.
Yeah, you look like an alcoholic when you're driving.
Yeah, but you'll be able to really diss the cop after he comes at you hard and dumps it in and tries to tell you that it's beer.
If you're looking to pick some of this up, also head on over to liquiddeath.com/bombhole. There you'll be able to get a few free koozies with your purchase if you're interested in chugging some can.
And chances are, after hearing us talk about it week by week, you're going to buy some. Why not get the koozies? Use the code. Help these brothers out.
Yeah, it helps us out. It helps us out a lot if you use the code.
Yeah.
Again, liquiddeath.com/bombhole. Now, we're going to get into Liquid Death Spinning Wheel of Death. What we have here is, as per your guys' request, cold call famous person in your phone. So we know that Gunny has a lot of famous friends in the action sports world.
Doesn't mean they'll answer.
Doesn't mean they'll answer.
Doesn't even mean they want to talk to me.
Yeah. But we're going to have them spin this and see what lands on.
We'll see just how Gunny, important you are here.
Here we go.
Yes, probably not as important.
I have a feeling they'll take your call.
You got to show the camera. So just give it a pretty heavy spin. You spin it, and then we'll tell you.
This way?
Yeah. Oh,
Todd Richards. He pretty much lives on this show.
We got a friend of the show, Todd Richards.
So we're going to give Todd a call here?
Let's give Todd a call.
Todd
will
answer. He's never short on words. He's probably surfing. Let's try.
He's kind of a banter champion, I would say.
Will this thing pick up?
Does he have a waterproof phone that he uses out surfing?
Yeah, hopefully he's got a Bluetooth headphones in on the wave right now. He's got one of those earpieces in.
That would be tight.
Yeah,
I'm riding a wave.
Come on, Richards.
He's going to answer.
I hold it right up here by the...
Yeah, right by the mic.
Hello.
Todd, this is Chris Gunnarson. We're calling in from the bomb hole to see how you're up to.
Are you at the hole yet?
I'm at the
Yeah,
hole.
you're on air right
You're
now.
on air. You're live.
Oh, am I the most famous person in your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a list of about 10. You were kind of further down the list, but that's where the wheel landed.
Yeah, what's up?
You're the most famous person I know. Come on, man.
Perfect.
We're reminiscing. We've been going down many rabbit holes of the journey of the last 25 years. You've been a big part of it, and we thought we'd give you a call. What do you have to say about that?
Hey, that's great.
Short on words.
My numbers. My bomb hole numbers are exceeding expectations.
This is the first time he's ever been short on words. Do you have bomb hole numbers already? Has this thing launched?
Yeah, this thing's hitting. People are liking it.
Was it today?
His thing launched on Wednesday, and it's slapping.
Wednesday? How did I miss that?
lot of-
I saw the Instagram. I didn't do.
Well, you got
You
like
gotta
a
pay attention.
Yeah.
Have your kids show you how to use Instagram, and then you can go on it and see it.
You got to pay attention. It should be like the shirt that I wear, because I don't clearly.
His numbers are slapping, though. All right, let's get back to the show.
All right, Richard, that's all we needed.
Oh, that was it. Okay, great. Thanks. Glad I could be of service.
I'll talk to you later.
I'll see you guys.
I'm excited he answered.
God, Richards is an absolute legend. I remember you said there's some story you had about four mates shitting their pants or something. You said briefly on the phone with me the other day.
Oh man,
Those are the keywords.
That's a keyword. Four mates shit pants.
That was more like what am I supposed to tell stories of like the guys from the Forum Age in their pants? That was, but yeah,
The answer to that would be yes. Actually,
it's not like the entire Forum 8 all had a contest.
They all shit their pants at once?
Interesting that how many of them did shit their pants. Probably the. So like Devon, for example, if you still go to, I think they moved it to Bear Mountain now, but there's actually an old Devon Walsh Shorties board where he wrote the best runs of my life. And then it's like underlined because you have a little whiskey stomach maybe one morning and something happened. Another good one was Bjorn having to take off his boot and sock and wipe with his sock. That was hitting a jump also at Snow Summit. But by hands down, the best of all those was Mount Snow, Vermont. X Games, Big Air, JP lands a little too hard, sits one down a little too hard, and craps his pants.
the cheek
I've
spread.
heard this story.
Okay, yep.
And it was incredible
This is a
because
legendary one.
the crowd was so massive at the bottom of that venue. It was on the Corinthia side, and the whole crowd was just, and he didn't want to have to go into the crowd. And so people up in the rider, the drop-in are like, what is that smell? And he's like, yeah, I know. What is that? What is that? And so I'm not even sure why, but I ended up giving Peter a ride back to his house. We're talking Peter Line. I'm dropping names right now. So I give Peter a ride back to the Forum House, and as we're pulling up, we can see like funny antics happening inside. The curtains are moving, and we get to the front door, and JP's like hung his boxers on the door handle. So Peter's got no way but to have to and he's trying to use his board to get the underwear off the door. So that was a good one. I just think it was interesting. Of the Forum 8, I know of at least half of them having pretty substantial shit stories.
Jump
When
to
you're
shit your
when you're
pants.
getting after it, like if you're getting after it, hitting jumps,
It's a good chance.
it's impossible that you're gonna not when you come off of a jump and your one butt cheek hits and the other one's not hitting, and it's a spread situation. It's happened at every snowboarder I know.
Well, and you have that fear-based feeling that you have to shit your pants, too, when you're scared of the jumps. So one's loaded in the chamber.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're preloaded.
So if you're going to fall on your butt hard, chances are.
I had a spreader situation that required a stitch.
Ooh, that's a
You
super
actually
spreader.
super spreader
That's a
event.
super spreader
It was a
event.
super spreader event, and it was off a rail actually. And interestingly enough, it's the same flat to down rail that KJ did the first 450 on that I think anyone
Famous
had ever
rail.
seen. Famous rail. It was set up in the Westridge Park at Snow Summit, and then we took that same rail and reset it up on a bigger setup, and that's when KJ did that 450 on. It was so incredible. But yeah, I tried to gap to it and just came off wrong and went super spreader event, and it actually haunted me for weeks, if
I
not
haven't
months to
heard
come.
of that happening, that you actually had to get it restitched.
Well,
Not restitched, but spread so far that you have to get a stitch.
obviously you've never been around childbirth.
I'm talking snowboarding events.
Well, yes.
Super spreaders here.
Yeah.
I think, God, who was it that hit the rock? Man, it was so long ago. It was one of the most brutal photos they ever ran in I'm pretty sure it was Transworld. It was like Marc-Andre Tart or someone like that.
Oh.
That had hit a rock. went straight butt to rock.
I remember that.
And it was like horrifying image.
Horrifying image.
Okay, let's change gears here. I'm going to talk to you about, earlier I brought it up, but Shaun White came to you. He's getting ready for the Olympics. And this had to be a completely daunting build. He said, I want my own private half pipe. I want to learn some new tricks. I want a foam pit, which had never been done to my knowledge in snowboarding. And you guys went up in the mountains in Colorado and built this elaborate half pipe. Let's talk about the Project X, as we like to call it, excursion.
Project X, on several levels, Project X was one of the dopest projects ever. And I'll get into that. But I think first you got to back up just a little bit. So Shaun White and family grew up at Snow Summit. So I've known him since he was 6. Known him well. I mean, he's been, I would sit here today and tell you he's been like a brother, like a little brother for a long time. In the early days, we all thought Jesse was going to be like, Jesse was such a good rider, his older brother. And Carrie was a good rider. The whole family competed. Kathy and Raj, they even competed in like the USASA Methuselah, category. But Shaun was so dominating. I mean, he would win slopestyle and pipe. He'd win everything in his age class. So then we moved him into open class, and he'd win everything there too at like 12 or 8 or 10. He's so good so early. Going back to that Outliers book, by the way, the reason he brought that up with me that time we were having dinner was that he had now tried to figure out like what circumstances in my life led to this success I've had as a half pipe rider and snowboarder in general. And he really attributed it to the Snow Summit half pipe that had a rope toe, had generally better weather conditions than anywhere because it's SoCal, it's like always sunny. And it was a really good pipe. And he figured out that he'd probably got more laps on more days than anyone else, like his age and in his era early on. And with that rope toe, he was just lapping it like crazy. I think that's really cool that he's given credit to like something like that. There's also with Shaun, clearly, whether you love him or hate him, I know there's some people have, I call them unnecessary haters, but I love him like a brother. So I think he's awesome. But he has this sort of Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Gretzky thing that certain people have, Serena Williams, that they're incredibly naturally gifted, but they also have this mental, just absolutely dominating, must win at all costs kind of presence. And when you put those two things together, you get Tiger Woods, you get, Serena Williams. And Shaun is that. I mean, that's undeniable. He's going for his 5th Olympics. Like, how many people can do 5 Olympics?
That's crazy. And
he's got, 3 golds in the 4 he's done, and he's the returning gold medalist. And so I've known Shaun, the point there is I've known Shaun literally his whole life. And we've traveled the world together. We've done all kinds of projects together. There's a secret Russia project that never happened that is an interesting story too, maybe the scariest time of my life. But with Project X, that was a Red Bull funded project. They knew, Shaun and Red Bull had a big partnership at the time, and Shaun knew he's got big expectations for himself, and they wanted to support that. But where do you go do that? It's not like you can build it in a warehouse somewhere. And so we, with a pretty big budget, we worked out a plan to build out in Silverton, Colorado, very remote location, heavy logistics. We built this huge foam pit that had to be shipped out there and then pulled into the backcountry. That might have been the single hardest challenge of the whole thing. But to have, there's no real infrastructure at that place. So our cat sat on the side of the road. We had one cat that wouldn't restart. So we literally, I think for 30 days it ran. Like we just kept putting fuel in it because you couldn't restart it. We had the cutter shipped out there, and we had a whole crew that was, the coolest part of that was for the first part of the season, you're waiting on natural snowfall. And so the location we'd picked, which had to have the right pitch and everything, was below these 2 chutes, the Narcoolwar and something else like the Grand or something like that. And these huge chutes where throughout the early part of the season, as the snow would load up, we'd bomb it by helicopter to break free enough snow until we had enough in the basin to go in and build a pipe. So it was all natural snow that had been bombed into enough quantity to build that pipe, and then bring in the foam pit, then bring in everything. And so that was really it was interesting because there was a lot of criticism that, oh, Shaun by himself with this private thing and nobody else gets that. But, that's where it was at least on his level. But for my crew, and I have to give credit where it's due. Like I at that stage, I wasn't at every hour of every project. In fact, Frank Wells was spearheading the bulk of that project along with several other people. And so I would fly in and out of it. But for some of our crew, they'd be there for weeks, if not months on end, just on call to either first when we built it, but then when we had to keep it maintained. But what was so amazing was that Red Bull had a helicopter on standby at all times and a whole fleet of snowmobiles, brand new, sitting in this giant trailer that we had access to at all times. And so there was an X amount of hours that had to be burned on that heli, and if Shaun wasn't using it, we would. And so we got a lot of good POW days in Silverton, backcountry, either heli or on foggy, bad viz days. We'd take the snowmobiles up this this kind of BLM zone that was really good. And so we had a lot of good riding on that project. That was one of the best parts of the project, at least for our crew, because there was so much riding, which was unusual for one of our events, in such killer terrain in a good year. But then, specifically on Shaun, like watching his focus, and he had very specific tricks in mind that he wanted to do, and reps, as you called them earlier. It was just a very cool scene to be around. His dad, Raj, flew in, and we went and did some good backcountry heli-in with the Raj, who's a good old soul surfer. So that was a very cool project.
No one else hit this pipe?
No, I want to say who came in. Our crew did. Frank
so
would ride with
down.
him.
That's so cool.
I have a board that's the one that says, "What would CK do?" There's a good story about that board if I can tell it, because it comes full circle to the Shaun pipe. So there's so Craig Kelly is one of my biggest inspirations and heroes in snowboarding. He should be, and how about a gunshot? Maybe a gunshot too.
Super air horn, gunshot. He gets them all.
Whatever, mash the whole board over that. I met Craig Kelly once in Alaska back when Transworld did the Transworld Industry Conference. This is probably maybe 2000, 2001. And I was so stoked. I was at this dinner table, and it's like Ken Block and his wife, Damon Way, and Craig Kelly. And, they do the introductions, and Craig's like, "Oh, Gunny, you're the guy, you build all the parks and the pipes and stuff." And I was just like blown away he even knew who I was. And he asked me, he's like, "I really want to try one of those super pipes." This is when we'd just gone to 18 footers, which at the time that was like, oh my God, an 18-foot half pipe. And he's like, I really want to try one of those, but I don't want to embarrass myself. Like, is there a place I could do it at night somewhere with some lights? And I was like, absolutely. Yeah. You just tell me when you're available, and I will find a place to make that happen. And then sadly he passed before that could happen. But the day that we got the word that Craig had died in the avalanche, it was probably like 2 or 3 days before we were completely done with all the X Games courses. So it was late January. And I grabbed a can of spray paint in the middle of the night. We had this gap jump that the gap went with the jump, not across, right? And so I knew where the camera angles were going to be. And so I climb up on the snowcat tracks with my spray paint, and I write Craig Kelly as big as I might, I could do inside the gap where I knew the camera would be. And I didn't know it at the time, but this woman that worked in PR at the X Games, she was snowshoeing at like 10 at night up the mountain, and she saw me doing that and took a photo of it. And so she gave me this photo a few days later, and it's actually the top sheet of that board. So now fast forward to, so part 2 of the story is that comp happens. Shaun White had grabbed this, he kind of stole this skull and crossbones flag on a piece of bamboo at the ski patrol shack at the top of Buttermilk in Aspen. And as he's coming down, like, patrollers saw him do it. They didn't know who he was. It didn't matter who he was. Like, he stole their flag. And so they're chasing him, and he basically dips into the course, slopestyle course, and he hits the jump and transfers across. And he's like holding the skull and crossbones flag, jumping across. And I don't know if it was Blotto or maybe it was Moran. Somebody got that shot, and I never knew about it until like a year later. I was making that board. Jake Burton had been like, "Hey, you want to make a custom board?" And I used the photo of the spray paint, me spray painting in the middle of the night. It said Craig Kelly. And then like a year later, this big poster framed image shows up, and it's Shaun jumping that thing. And it didn't have a note, didn't say who it was from, but I found out it was from Jake, and he just thought it was cool that that's what I picked to make on my board, and he knew that there was like a backup to that story. So I make this board, and it's a Vapor, which is like the most expensive board Burton was making at the time, with honeycomb construction and all this stuff. And I'm not thinking clearly. So I had the base graphic say, what would CK do? And the top sheet is that photo of the spray paint. And I get the board and I realize, like, I can never ride this thing. I can't ride this beautiful board. And yet it's like the most expensive board Burton makes. Now I feel like a jerk for having wasted that awesome moment. So I took that board out to Silverton, and I'm like, I'm going to do one run on it. And I'm going to honor the base graphic of what would CK do. He's got this perfect half pipe, but it was also an epic pow day. And so we did the run called the Narcouloir, which was up above that pipe. And I'm coming down, and the whole outside of the pipe was just like this perfect wave of 2 foot knee deep pow. And then in that moment, I'm like, what would CK do? Would he hit the pipe? So I went pow.
Yeah, he would hit the wave for sure.
So that board has one run on it, and it was at Silverton, Colorado,
Wow.
on the Project X. And I hope I chose correctly. But,
I think you did. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And no better way to honor him than that. No better way to honor him than that. I want to pivot back to something earlier, talking about Shaun. You know, we've been on both sides of the conversation with Shaun, and one thing I think of that's kind of bullshit too is I think, like, for example, Shaun goes and he learns all these tricks. And people are like, well, you know, he has this advantage, so that's why he won, because he maybe had a foam pit or this or that. And you're like, the reality of the situation is, no, even if anybody else was there, they're still not pushing it as hard as him. You know what I'm saying? Like, I hate when people try to use excuses like he had advantages that I don't have, that's why he's better than me. Nah, he works harder than you. Like, he tries hard. That's my take on that. Do you want to elaborate? Or?
Well, he definitely, absolutely works hard. But there's another side of that, too. He has a disadvantage in that, imagine if Tiger Woods decided to go to the local municipal course to practice before the Masters. What do you think that would be like? He would get hounded and flocked. He wouldn't actually get to train. And so there was a piece of that, too, where Shaun was so big. He was bigger than snowboarding. He transcended the sport of snowboarding to the point where, and I'd been with him on plenty of occasions where just walking through the base area or getting on the lift or in the lift line, he's just getting hounded. And if he doesn't like immediately like pony up and bro down with everybody, it's like, oh, Shaun White's a dick. And that's not the case. But man, it's like, I don't know if you saw that Bieber thing the other day where like there's people flocking outside of Bieber's house. He can't even live his life. Yeah. And I'm not like a big Justin Bieber fan or anything, but
I'm a believer.
Well, so Shaun has had that level of fandom that would make it really hard to try and just go to the local pipe and train, especially during that.
You can't live a normal life.
So that was the reason for that kind of private training stuff, was like take away all that. I mean, he's got a lot of pressure. He's got to think about winning. He wants to win. And so to have a venue that takes away those distractions to the point where he can just focus on his sport, it's why nowadays so many skaters and moto dudes and golfers have private TFs, is so they can do that. And that was just new for the sport, so it was easy to hate on that. You know?
He earned that right to have that too. You know, he got it for a reason. He had those sponsors. He made his way to be number one. And that Pearson at the top's going to get hated on. That's just a fact. Number one, like look at Burton. Burton gets so much hate to the number one brand.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
You're absolutely right. And I think, you know, if you actually know Shaun in like, you know, personal, private, intimate settings, and I have many story examples like this, you know what a good guy he is. But it's hard when you have that level of fame and fortune, and even the people that you think you can trust maybe aren't always looking out for your best interests, and so you put up a wall and a guard, and I think that happens with a lot of celebrities, and I think that's happened with him. And I just, you know, I know, regardless of what anybody else thinks, that he's a damn good guy.
Yeah, you've known him that long.
And, you know, speaking of Shaun White controversy, and this isn't his fault, but the perfect 100, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
That's one that's caused a lot of controversy, and I'll just state right here on the bomb hole that to my dying day, I will back that decision, whether people agree with me or not. Perfect 100, you know, people were like, that's not even possible, and he'd put his hand down, and here's what I will say, because at that time, I'm the sport organizer for the X Games. My job is I sit behind the judges, and I'm on a headphone like this, and I'm talking to the TV truck, the starter at the top of the pipe, and the judges. And it's all about, like, get the scores in, get it up, drop the next rider. a pause for a break, commercial, whatever. And so Shaun puts down this run that at that moment in the sport was so far beyond what anybody had done at that point. And if you think about sports like gymnastics or diving, there are perfect 10s, there are perfect 100s. I don't think our sport had ever had one. And so there was this debate about the hand drag, and did he actually put weight on the hand, or was it more like a slap? And all I have to say is no one had ever done a 12. No one had ever done a back-to-back 12s. The judges we sit there and there's these height meters, right? That's all technology driven, that tells you exactly how high every hit is, and then your average. Shaun's average that night was like 6 feet higher than the next person's average. Ooh. So he's going so much bigger, so much more tech, and he's doing tricks that nobody's ever done, and he's just stomping. Mm-hmm. And the judges sat there and they're like, if he does this, he's never even done this in competition. It's by far the greatest half pipe run ever done. And so they were like, if we could give him 123, we would, but the max is 100. And so that's how that went down.
Wow. Makes sense. Totally makes sense. Now, I want to go down another little wormhole here. You know, we talked about it a little bit off air, but being from other sports, in action sports, you have surfing, you have motocross, you have things that have a points chase per se. And I just personally, I always jam this agenda down everybody's throats, but I would love to see like a slope style half pipe, more of a points chase kind of event series. I think it would be good for the sport. I think it would be good for everything to kind of like build those battles. Oh, this guy's in first, but he could be in second, and they're duking it out, yada, yada, yada. You get the whole point there. Now, in your opinion, what do you think needs to change to improve competitive snowboarding for like the general public to consume and to enjoy?
Well, I think there's two very, very different routes to go based on what you just brought up. As far as the points race goes, I mean, that's been tried, and there is a point. There's World Snowboard ranking system. There's FIS ranking system. TTR used to be a system. I'd like to believe pretty valiantly to try and unite some of the events, because there's outlier events like X Games, Do Tour that didn't necessarily adhere to any point system. They just kind of did their own thing. Then there's like the US Open that was a part of the TTR series, which sort of kind of went away. And uniting all those things to actually create a points series, a league, if you will, like a street league or something like that, is so hard because of media rights and sponsorship, conflicts, right? Sponsorship pay the bills for each of these big events. It's unlike, say, PGA Tour, for example, where you have like FedEx that comes in and can be like a big overarching title sponsor of a section of the tour, and a points chase, which I think is a really cool format in golf. We don't have uniting sponsors that do that. Like Vans Triple Crown would have been the closest to do that, or Do Tour back when it was like truly like, at one point there was 3 snowboard events in the Do Tour, and so trying to align that would be really cool to pull that back together. How that then would convert to in like an Olympic year that we're about to go into. If you're a competitive athlete who wants to go to the Olympics, whatever nation you want to represent, you have to do the FIS system to get enough World Cup points, and whatever your country is, you then have to do their system to qualify for the team. So that's on a pretty grand scale. Now back to your question, I think like Peace Park, as far as like appealing to people, Peace Park has been such a cool thing because, like the Nixon Jib Fest, which in many ways was the blueprint for that, rider driven. This was Danny's idea of how do we change up the sport. It started with, half pipes getting boring. What if we chopped it up and put, hips and extensions and rails and gaps and stuff in? And then that grew to being like a whole park. Was just a really progressive way of looking at the sport. But then where we've taken it since then, especially with, what we've done with Woodward, is actually having Peace Parks that anyone can go ride at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations on a sort of a less than pro scale, but then culminate in a pro championship event, which we're planning to bring back now as we hopefully, knock on wood, as we get past the pandemic. And I think those have just become a little bit more attainable. And attainable, in my mind, makes it, for the masses who want to like live it and feel it and be a part of it versus just watch it, is something I think we need to do more of. Creating more, interactive, experiential moments, not necessarily competitions, that more people can be a part of. And that rolls right along with what Danny Davis, his thought was with Peace Park. And you guys probably know the story. I think he talked about it, is he had sponsorship money to go do a thing. And instead he was like, well, I'd want to do something with my friends and bring my like the best dudes and then eventually ladies to shred together and make it more of a community thing. And so I'm pretty bullish on that kind of approach to not just snowboarding, but any of these action sports events where you get more of the community involved at all levels.
That's something we're at the Bomb Hole. We're putting the puzzle pieces together for an event this year. And one thing that's been going through our heads a lot is like, I went to the race out in Mammoth to race my dirt bike, right? And it's the thing I like about like motocross is it's like you have vet class, you have kids racing 65s, then you have the pro class, and you have a parking lot that is filled with, people that are at a track to ride dirt bikes from, 50 plus vet class C to pro to kids. And they're all, although everybody's in different races, it is like everybody's together. It's this sense of togetherness. And I find that with events right now in snowboarding, there's a big divide. There's like X Games, and there's like quarter pipe contest, Peace Park, and it's like the pros and the friends of the pros. But there's not something that really like the general public and the pros all ride together. Maybe there's a Baker Banked, but I even still think you have to kind of qualify for Baker Banked Slalom.
That's hard to even get in. You get a lottery.
So like the idea for our event that we want to put together is something where it's like everybody can come together and ride the same course. And maybe there's a pro class that runs last and hits like a bigger section of the course or whatever. There's more details to it that we can talk about off air. But what are your thoughts on something like that?
I think it's awesome. And especially, this is what I saw in the early days of USASA is you'd have these multiple classes, Methuselah and Menahune and all that. And I think that anytime you can connect more people, it's great. Where there's a perfect platform to do that is Woodward. Let's do it. Bomb Hole, Woodward.
Blow it out.
Can you
camp in the parking lot there? I wonder about that.
Let me find out about that and get back to you.
Because I always think it would be cool to do a 2-day and people, maybe I'll give you the rundown on the air. Fuck it, who cares? But what I think would be cool is, they've done it before, things like a rat race, where it's like you race down the course, but it's not necessarily a border cross. It's a time trial, and it's got like some rollers, whoops, gaps, stuff you pretty close to you already have there, but maybe you make it a little bit more sketchy and exciting and tight and wild for that, for the event. And then you have a couple other one-off events. You have a quarter pipe, because those are always fun. Everybody hikes together, rides it. You have a jump jam, rail jam section, and then you kind of have King of the Weekend. But, day one, everybody races, everybody gets a time trial. Day two, open AM class runs first, and then pros run second, and then it's just a big blowout party Sunday night for everything. Everybody comes together and you do awards.
I love it.
So anyway, we can iron this in off air possibly more.
Well, the real sort of challenge in that will be finding the right course setup, because to be compelling when you're at, a pro level, but also suitable when you're at a lower level is it can be a pretty big gap in ability levels.
Inclusion is what it's about, though. I even feel like with events these days, you look at Red Bull Recharged, it was just a smaller.
Right.
It's not so gnarly like these super parks of the past, Seems like even for the pros, they don't want to hit these gigantic death jumps. As much as a photographer, I want to see them hit those death jumps. But it's moving towards like a safer environment, I guess.
More inclusive.
Yeah, more inclusive.
I like that term.
Yeah.
We need to do more inclusive stuff, Yeah, I mean, I grew up SoCal by the time I was, in my teens, and I was definitely mostly into skateboarding, just starting to kind of touch on snowboarding, and I'd surf a bit, and you'd go to Malibu Third Point. It was such a like locals only, kooks get off the wave kind of thing, or you'd go into a skate, surf, snow shop and get vibe just for being in there. I remember going into a shop with Peter Line, and these guys vibed us so hard, and it was so funny because I think Peter was with 32 at the time, and is that right?
He was on 32 at some point,
and like. These guys are like doing everything they can to sort of make us feel super uncomfortable. And then finally, like Peter's like looking at these 32 boots, and like one of the guys finally makes the connection. Like, that's Peter Line, dude. That's Peter Line. What's up, guys? Can we help you with anything? And I always just be there's enough stress in life. Like it should be, we're bringing joy to people. Like we're doing fun stuff. We're as Nico Actipes used to say, we are riding plastic and wood toys on frozen water. Like, let's not take it too seriously. We're just having fun here. And so I'm all about bringing the fun.
Yeah, instead of bringing the vibe where you can't even walk in a shop. I mean, what kind of business model is that?
A failing one.
Yeah, a failing one.
That's how all the
that
shops
did fail
were back in the day, though. You know, as a kid, you being it's just different.
You weren't cool enough.
Yeah.
I think it might be time for a little name that video.
Woo!
Oh.
Okay, Gunny. Well, we adjusted this a little bit because
Because I'm old and my memory is failing.
that's not the exact reason, but I'm gonna answer that with no comment. What's your confidence level 0 through 10 on this thing?
Like 2.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
That's actually pretty high.
Really? Okay, 1.
We've had some 0.5s.
We've had negatives.
We had negatives.
I mean, you have to understand. Okay, A, I've been involved in a lot of video projects. I can't even, remember a quarter of them. And B, I have friends like Jeremy, for example, who are like, an encyclopedia on video parts. So I'm going to be terrible.
Okay, well, we'll see about that. Here we go.
Huge method, 24 feet, the highest on record. Oh, the double McTwist, 1260.
Whoa.
Is that from a contest? That's not a video part.
It's a contest. That's from X Games.
Okay.
You want to hear it again? You get it?
Huge double McTwist 1260. I mean, it's got to be Shaun, right?
That is absolutely correct.
Who was talking?
I think we called it the White Snake at one point. I think that was his switch.
Kevin Pierce, I think, on the mic. And maybe Keir Dillon or I'm not sure. Maybe Salema. I couldn't tell. So we got a cooler here.
Oh.
Filled with bomb hole merch. That's your prize.
It's heavy. It's hefty.
Stacked.
We filled with merch.
You got Gunny coming in.
nice.
You load that thing
You even
up.
got a side bag.
You got
of
a
merch.
side bag.
What?
Yeah. All bomb hole merch.
Merched up.
I can tell you what's going to happen is all this is going to get stolen by my kids. I won't even see this.
Perfect.
We'll go to their room.
As long as it gets used.
Everything
we're happy.
available at bombhole.com. I notice you have a bunch of X Games medals. I think you're the most X Games decorated human. But one thing that's a little bit better than the X Games is a bomb hole cooler. It's just like slightly like X Games gold. Then on the trophy mantle, bomb hole cooler right above it.
It's the perfect size too.
Yeah.
It's like it's your day pack. It's all you need.
Yeah.
All you need.
Oh yeah.
Sandwich and then beverages.
Exactly. Liquid Death, couple pub beers. Who knows?
Whatever you need.
Who knows?
Thank you very much for that.
Maybe a bologna sandwich.
I can't believe I got that one.
Yeah.
You sandbagged me though.
So and then we do have a part
likes to do
2
that.
for name that video part, but it's not for you.
We
It's
like
for
people to walk away winners. Yeah, but this is for the people.
This is for our listeners. Side note: all of the items available except for the cooler, the mugs, hats, T-shirts, everything's available at bombhole.com. We have a store if you want to check that out. Now we'll get into part 2 for name that video part, which is for the listeners. If you know which video part this is, comment on the picture of Gunny's Instagram, his face when the episode comes out, and leave your answer. First person to get it correct gets a prize pack from us. And here we go. It's a classic from an older video.
Yeah, it sounds like an older video.
You want to hit a Patreon?
Yeah, let's get into a Patreon question.
Yeah.
This is from Justin Cafiero, Caf. Kind of a serious question here, and I think it's a good question. As head of Powdr Corp, I don't know if that's not your official title, but
I'm definitely not the head, but I talked to those heads.
it works for his question. As head of Powdr Corp, what sort of steps would you like to take to implement to combat the insane cost of daily lift tickets besides pushing Icon Pass as a solution?
Well, how about Woodward Park City?
There it
Has
is.
Anybody been up there? It's funny because, okay, first of all, you can buy a annual membership or monthly membership, right? That goes for a certain period of time that equates out to like $139 a month.
Woo.
Pretty cheap. If you go every single day, that's nothing. That's like half of what a lift ticket is at maybe another big ski resort nearby for a day.
Yeah, I was going to
month.
say that's like half of a lift day, half-day lift ticket. And
So
that,
way
can you buy
more.
1 month at a time too.
You can also buy a 1 month mountain park pass. It's even a little bit more affordable. Or let's say you're not committed or you're just popping into town. One thing we added, and it was very much off like the skate session model, is we have sessions now, right? So you're not necessarily buying a lift ticket for the day. You can buy a 10-to-1, a 1-to-4, or a night session for like, it depends on the time of year, but like $29.
Wow.
$39.
So you're not getting locked into this full day lift ticket like other resort models.
And for guys like you two, Eastone, Grenier, roll up. If you were paying guys, I know bomb hole guys get a little bit of courtesy. So I think we give you like 10% off or something.
10%.
Like 3.
I pay full price.
When you guys come up, you pop up for the day. Maybe you just do the 10-to-1 session. You're back down here in the studio and interviewing somebody else awesome.
That's incredible.
Or I'm working. I'm a working guy. How about Josh Fisher over at Burton? Guy holds it down here in the. Yep, let's.
Big old air horn.
Josh working man all day long. Pops up there with his kids at 5 p.m. They ride till 8, and they're on the membership program, but that would cost them like $29.
That's incredible.
So back to Calf's question, it's all about making it more accessible, more inclusive, breaking down some barriers of entry, and I will say this too. That was all very specific to Woodward Park City. I think the one thing that the pass model in general, the last 5-10 years, has actually made skiing and snowboarding a lot more affordable. The day tickets are still pretty expensive, to bordering on ridiculously expensive, depending, if you're in like Aspen or something like that. But having a pass that, basically pays for itself if you go more than 5 times, now it's just a matter of frequency. So I actually think that the whole pass war that's happened has made the sport much more affordable if you're in that kind of network.
And do the other Woodwards trying to get a model like Park City, or is Park City just so unique with its own little slope that it's the only one you're doing that at?
Well, we are looking at a big part of my job that's maybe a little less sexy, but definitely important, is what parts of that new model. That's a very new, the idea of having a membership where you can go there. It's almost like a country club membership, but for action sports. That model is totally new for us and for Powdr. And so as we look at that, one of the things that I'm involved in with the heads of Powdr Corp, because I'm not the head, but with the heads, is where can we replicate that and how does it work? And we're less than 2 years old, so we're learning every day and analyzing our business strategy and how that works and for who is a big part of what we're looking at both there and where that might exist in the future elsewhere.
It's an awesome model.
Okay, I'm going to change gears again. Pivot, as we like to say on the show. Pivot. So we basically talk a lot about on the show successes. The things that we've listed off prior to the show, all the wild dream projects you've tackled. Now, what I'm curious in is like what, I think we learn the most from our failures personally. Do you have any notable failures or things that have gone wrong that you've learned a lot from in the course of your career?
The one that immediately pops to mind, 1997 or 98. I worked on a glacier in Solden. I went over there as, touted as like, the best park guy in the U.S. is coming to Solden for the Billabong Killer Camp. Beautiful setting. Solden is an incredible resort, huge resort.
What country?
Austria. Sorry, just outside of Innsbruck, maybe an hour outside of Innsbruck. Sold in Austria, and I got there and I got a hard reality check. I didn't speak the language. Their machines were different there. They wouldn't let me drive a snowcat, so I was planning on just doing it all myself. And man, it was like I considered it a fail. In fact, I had this journal I was writing, and I'm not a big journal guy, but I wrote this whole like woe is me that I found maybe a few years ago of like this pity party that I'd written, like how failing that whole project was, because I was so used to having resources and team around me that to go and try and do it on my own in a foreign place, it was a big learning curve. And one of the biggest, I think, lessons for me there was how much pre-planning you have to do before you just go after it. There's so much involved in any of these projects, big or small, of what's your pre-planning, and then how you're going to set everything up to ensure the best possible success in a sport or a job that is so fraught with potential uncertainty and variability.
You went totally solo to make that happen?
Totally solo.
That's crazy.
And we pulled it off too, by the way. They still talk about, it's such a great park and everything. And for me, it was
They were happy, but in your mind it was a fail.
Yeah. And I did it 2 years in a row. I had to go back the next year to try to reprove. And now when I came back year 2, I definitely set things up a little bit differently. And the dude that owned that camp, he was kind of a wild man. There's so many wild stories. Like I met Gigi Ruff there. He was like 13 and he was riding for the shop. The guy his name was Ide, and he owned a shop in Vienna, and he had this summer camp on the glacier, and Gigi was like one of his shop skater snowboarders. And, 13-year-old Gigi Ruff, it was killer hanging with him. But man, here's a crazy story. So if you guys have been to Austria or any other parts of Europe where you see these massive crevasses, you'd take the lift above where the glacier park was, and you'd go over these enormous, cavernous, into the oblivion crevasses, which is very different than anything we have here in the U.S. And then we go over to the park zone where I'd been working for a month plus, and I remember on the last day of the camp, I hit the last jump in the park. I do like backside 180 or something. I land and I ride out, and this guy behind me hits, and he catches his toe edge, scorpions, and boom, opens up a crevasse and goes into the crevasse right in front of me and like all these other people. What? A small crevasse, narrow but deep, and he's suspended upside down by his board. His board is basically spanning either side of the crevasse, and we do like this fireman's in a ladder where like everybody grabs each other's ankles because no one wanted to get near him in case it was going to open even wider, and pull him out. And I got on my board and I rode away. And I'm like, I'm never coming back here again. I'd driven a snowcat over that spot. You know, I jumped it. Shit. Yeah. Like he literally scorpioned and it opened up and just went down into it.
They just don't know when these are going to open up.
That's one hell of a scorpions.
They're a little looser in Europe. Yeah, that must have been a heavy scorp.
That's a
heavy scorp.
Scorp to oblivion. The world just opens up to eat you.
So another thing too, talking about Buds and I are kind of more from the video part realm, I'd say. Photographer, we're out in the streets, hitting rails, hitting street features, and along came X Games Real Snow, which was fucking huge for us street guys because we're used to being not really in the limelight at all, and that all changed the first year you guys came out with that, and you were the instrumental part in conceptualizing that whole thing. I'd like to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, so the ESPN already had Real Street, which was the skate version, and that Mike Sinclair gets the credit for that. Helping come up with that concept. I also am a huge fan of video parts and street snowboarding, even though there's not a lot to build there. Just as a fan of the sport, and then so many of my friends like Jeremy, JP, Thien, and those guys, like so many people made careers out of street snowboarding. And so it was very cool to get to shine a spotlight on a side of that most people wouldn't get to see. And so I took very seriously how would we go about producing a show. And so that was an interesting one because we, meaning S.P.T, actually got the contract to produce those shows soup to nuts. So it was literally like, here's your budget, you come up with what it's going to look like. And so in terms of how we would pick the riders, step one on my end was hire my brother-in-law, Mac Dog, to be the real production arm of it. We were more like the packager, right? And so working with, Mike and his wife, Catherine, who's my sister-in-law, and then our team at S.P.T, we were really doing more organizing of like, what this has to be about is the spotlight is on the athlete. So let's pick the 8 best or whatever the number was. It changed a few times. The most interesting and maybe diverse group of street riders and turn them loose. Like let's give for the most part an open slate. And I think in the beginning it was like you had a month or maybe it was 2 months from the time you got the nod to when you had to turn in your part, fully edited, fully packaged, music licensed, the whole deal. I remember JP, and I think in year 1, JP had a Santigold song that, because we all are friends with, Trevor and Santigold by default, and Santigold's got a little bit of a Nixon vibe going on. It was all good. Well, there's a lesson learned there about her label had something different to say. She could be like, oh yeah, use my song. And then the label would be like, that's also partially our song. And so I remember like that being the day that Real Snow was about to drop or supposed to drop, the contract wasn't signed, and I think Chad had to step in and do a little something. I don't know if we're talking on the air about that, but Cheddar biscuits, yep, and made that happen. But when I look back in the early days of snowboarding, like every Mac Dog movie, Hard, Hungry, and the Homeless, and Roadkill, and even later on with like Subject Hawkinson and some of the TV movies, like like I can visualize and see every moment. Like, if I hear a song pop up on the radio, and I'm like, oh, that's that moment in whatever. I think video parts have been such a killer part, such an important part of first skateboarding and then snowboarding. And to be able to create something like that brought it to a little bit more of a mainstream. Maybe there's some controversy there of like, is that getting played out or whatever? But I always looked at it like you're paying respect to another side of the sport that doesn't get that spotlight very often. You're legitimizing it, and you're opening the portal to a wider audience to appreciate a really fucking difficult part of the sport. I mean, look, you won it, right? 2018.
Yeah, he's got a medal.
I don't remember the year, but yeah, the thing that was cool is like, prior when you guys started, all of a sudden, W.I.P.S Parody is getting an X Games medal. A guy who's an icon in our sport, but relatively, I don't want to say no name, but he's pretty more into the core audience from the. He's getting a public spotlight, and things that happened that were really cool is like all of a sudden I was riding for Monster at the time. There's an energy drink bonus for an X Games Real Snow medal. And I think what that ended up doing for the sport is it took street snowboarding and said like, yeah, there's an argument that says like it shouldn't be judged like like it's fucking an art or whatever. I get that, but like at the end of the day, like what it did is raise the bar. It raised the bar like. Tricks got bigger, tricks got harder. All of a sudden, Breezy's like bringing bobcats into the streets and
jumping off of buildings.
Breezy was built for that contest.
Totally. Breezy made a good living. I made a lot of money the year I won.
Made how much money that year?
Louis made like $75,000 the year he won. So it took something from our little side of the sport that didn't get much shine, and all of a sudden, like there's energy drinks deals happening. There's people like Breezy that are out there like with an entire assault vehicle filled with shovels and winches and all this stuff and jumping off of buildings, and it just really I think it did a lot for the sport, and that's all accredited to you guys. So it's really cool, and it's still obviously going today. And
the coolest thing too, when we're out in the streets, you tell people you're filming for X Games, they instantly give you permission to jump off their roof or do anything because it's such brings it to a serious level. You're no longer just this kid out there filming for yourself.
You know what I'll say on all that is that, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the people and the teams and stuff like that, but there's also there's a little bit of some deserved credit to the people who can enable stuff like that to happen, right? And so ESPN, behemoth media company, recognized like this is a thing. So we're gonna let you go and do it, and we're gonna fund it. And so you gotta, it's sort of like what Powdr's doing right now for what we're doing with Woodward is there's probably an unsung credit for, yes, park builders and people behind the scenes and people in the front of the scenes, but there's also the people that actually enable it, because as Danena said to me recently, he talked about people who bring money to opportunity, right? It's like, I'm lucky because sometimes I get to bring the opportunity, but you can't do that unless you got the money. You guys know that. You're running this big production with the bomb hole, so it takes a little. You got to pay the bills, right? Isn't that what you call it?
Absolutely.
But you have a
pay those bills. There's the guy that's actually signing off on the idea and willing to commit to it. Well, needs to get some props, huh?
And by the way, there's an art form and how to sell in an idea just to enable that to happen, because it's not like people just throw money around because they think something might be cool. Like, they want to hear why, and is there a rationale, and is there going to be an ROI, and is there a market for that?
Yeah, and how do you
being able to quantify it,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to be able to quantify. If I give you X amount of dollars, how am I going to get that in return? Same goes for any kid that wants to aspire at any position. If you want to become a sponsored snowboarder, make it make sense for the company. If you sign me, you'll sell this much shit.
You'll make this much money.
If you have this project in mind, make it make sense. And it seems like you're a master of being able to say, hey guys, we need some funding for this project. This is why you should support it, sponsor it. This is what you're going to get in return. Do you want to elaborate on any of that stuff?
Well, I guess that's where, I think some of the people that I'm very inspired by right now have done an admirable and successful job of balancing kind of three things, like your work life, your family life, and your sort of what I call your true to this sort of form, right? And I I'm very aware. I joke with Jeremy about this sometimes, where I've got one foot in the corporate. There's a responsibility there, and it's not like corporations are evil. That's just a way of lumping together companies and applying business to make something happen. All these things we're talking about and all these projects I've been involved in don't happen unless somebody got behind them, right? And so how you balance sort of the business side of things with the true to form, true to vibe, true to soul and spirit is a real art form. And then how and for me, my biggest failing is not doing as good as I could or should on the family side. And I'm trying to do better. And there's guys like Jeff Baliba is fantastic at that. I think Ryan Immigart, I don't know if you guys know Ryan, but over at Volcom, it's like he to me is a great success story. One of the first Volcom athletes, period, who later ran the music label, and then now is essentially one of the owners and kind of running the whole show. He's done a really good job of staying true to this, which is that's their thing, and being a great family man. He's got either 4 or 5 kids, some of which he's raised by himself for a while, and has done a killer job keeping that killer brand alive. And that's a really important thing for me, is finding that. People talk about life balance and stuff, but there's a balance between like the two sides of the work, like the core cool side, but then also like the business side, and then also not forgetting that you're a human being and you got a real life, and
you got to whack a couple pow turns every once in a while.
Do you find yourself having to travel a lot these days with your position?
Well, I mean, I have been on.
You're a pretty big dog. You must have a lot of places you can be.
There's a lot of places to be, but this last 15 months I've gone almost nowhere because of COVID. But prior to that, a lot of travel. Now in my S.P.T life, a ton of travel. I'm a multiple million miler on a couple airlines and stuff, and I've gotten to go to a lot of cool places, usually for a long period of time on a really focused work period. And now I do quicker, shorter trips, but a lot more of them. So
you're multiple million miler.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's a lot of travel.
Going back to what you were saying earlier, what I hear is you said the word balance, and it's fucking so hard to find, just on a personal level, trying to find it. I always find, like, when I'm doing great at my career, so to speak, in quotations, maybe my personal life's going to shit because I'm just horse blinder, tunnel vision. And it's just like that quest. As you get older, you realize it's not about maybe the successes. It's not about being like uber psycho successful in one area. And then it's like trying to make it all work. And that harmony and balance is something that I've been searching for myself.
Well, every once in a while you get a reality check that reminds you that you got to do that. You got to do a better job at that. And sadly, those are often kind of harsh or catastrophic. It's right here, and it's going to go back to something that Eastone asked about giving credit where credit's due on the guys that are working hard and building. And so, like, we had this opportunity years ago to make this board with Burton when Brian Knox was there. And, everybody has their own preference of a cool board that they like to ride, but I figured, like, there's a really great powder board in the Juice Wagon, and let's make one that all of our team would be stoked on and honor a couple of our fallen soldiers. And so Jeff Fluddo, he was one of the OG S.P.T guys from the very, very beginning, and just a legend. Older guy compared to the rest of the crew. He ran Timberline Mount Hood forever. I think he had more hours in a snowcat than anyone else on the planet at the time. Sadly died in a car accident. And then our man, Jeremiah Pebley, who was like a little brother to me, grew up in Big Bear, rode a lot with the White family, good friends with Runke. And he was kind of the little bro of S.P.T, and he tragically died also. So when we made this board, it was a testament to those guys. And I probably, there's a famous CEO named Jack Welch who used to run GE, and he had these like 10 points of great leadership. And one of them was celebrate your successes. And I think one of my, if I could criticize my own style, is I haven't done a good enough job stopping and celebrating every time you have a success. Because usually it was like right on to the next thing. Like, okay, cool, X Games is over. We got to get to the US Open, or we got to get to Japan, or we got to go. And you just never had a chance to really stop and take a break. And then as our work got more year round, then you really never had a chance. And so, little things like this, it's a board, so that's not significant enough. But I do try and stop every once in a while more often and think about how important life is and how short it is, and to do the right thing with your friends and your family and loved ones and get some perspective. I think this pandemic has actually created a lot of perspective for people on that front. So Floto, Maya, rest in peace.
Rest in peace. That's nice for you to honor them like that.
Another talking point I wanted to bring up was upon doing some research, speaking with Chad, Jeremy Jones, Ken Block, a lot of people that are close in your circle, you could say, they kind of just kept going back to the sentiment. They're like, Gunny is just, he's such a people person. He can go into a meeting with execs that, you know, for example, Ken would say like, I don't have anything in common with this person. But like Gunny, he just hits it off with everybody he meets, everywhere he goes. You take the time. You're a people person. How much of your success? I hate to use that word, and it's kind of corny, but like how much of, we'll say success, would you accredit to your not your people skills, but your nourishing of relationships and taking the time to talk to the right people and get to know people?
Well, I suppose some of that's probably just like in my DNA. You know, I think some of the people in my family are good people persons. One thing you got to remember too is that in the early days of my career, so prior to that, say I'm a teenager trying to figure out life. I think I was, you know, in like high school, I was that guy that was friends with like everybody, with the jocks, with the football players, definitely with the skaters, because that's where I was in my scene. But I did a good job of sort of navigating and being really like, not really in one fraternity, so to speak, but in like a group. But and then later, so when at Snow Summit specifically, you have to remember that in that early era, these were peers of mine, friends of mine who would come up and snowboard. They were starting these companies, like Ken starting DC. I knew him after he'd started DC for a few years, and it was already pretty big. But like Rawl and Ruff with the Forum and Special Blend and Foursquare, or Wooly when he was starting Volcom, Bob Hurley when he was transitioning from Billabong to then creating Hurley. And the list just goes on and on and on of companies and brands and people that were instrumental in that era. And we were peer groups. It wasn't like, oh, that's the guy that from, whatever. I better go bro down with them. Like everybody was trying to figure it out as we were going. And so I just happened to have a lot of friends that ended up, Chad from Nixon, right? Chad and Andy from Nixon, who ended up like being highly influential, successful business guys. And I've always been very both appreciative of and kind of in awe of people who can really take a vision and turn it into something. I'll tell you, I'm part of this. We call ourselves the YC crew. There's 7 of us. It's the closest thing to a fraternity that I'm in, and it's made up of an interesting and eclectic mix of guys. I won't go into the whole backstory of it because it's a little bit personal, but you got Chad and Andy from Nixon. So Chad Denena, Andy Lotz, Joel Gomez from who started Sessions and was a legendary skateboarder, then a legendary snowboarder, and was like so on the scene in the early days of, Kidwell, Selaznick, Craig, Jim Zellers, and so many. In fact, Gomez gave me the shirt. Stacy Peralta. He does these cool retro shirts on his RPM Vintage label. Doug Palladini, who's the president of Vans, and then 2 of our friends that are in the music industry, John and Mark, who are big ballers in the music industry, which is such a different world, but so cool. Like to me, like that, what they do is amazing. And I'm the young guy in the group, by the way. And so we get together several times a year. We text every day. We're on this like group chain, and it's all about sort of honoring and remembering to like live your life with your friends, stay connected. And the majority of the stuff we talk about is history of skateboarding, history of snowboarding, and the music industry. And then on top of that, like what's happening in each of our personal lives, which is really cool. So I think that, I guess, coming full circle of like the people person question is, that's what being a human being is about, is connecting with other people. And we do sometimes these silly but fun sports and activities and lifestyle, but how we connect with one another, that's kind of what life's about.
That was eloquent said.
That's
that
a heavy
amazing
group you're in too. Wow.
I'm like I think I'm the youngest and poorest of that group, but
The youngest and poorest.
I guess it depends on what circle you're running with where you feel like you're at. But
Andy has this baller place at Yellowstone Club that we go to without fail. We go every year, and he's such the consummate host, and that is such a
different world.
But we do that once a year, and we get together. We're gonna get this. I'm gonna supposedly, knock on wood, we'll see when this airs, but supposedly I'm going to with that crew. We're gonna go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I heard about this. Yeah,
2 of the guys in the crew are they're like voting members of the board, and so we're gonna go out there because our friend John manages Foo Fighters among a whole bunch of other amazing artists from back to Queen of the Stone Age, Beastie Boys, long list, and Foo Fighters got inducted this year, and so we're gonna go out and like cheer those guys on, and that's pretty awesome.
That's
for me.
awesome.
You may be the poorest in that group, but you're definitely the richest in the bomb hole studio. But going back, one
Depends
thing,
what group. Huh?
You said music execs and stuff in that circle, and I want to dive into the fact that you're big into drumming, playing the drums.
I am. There was a period of my life I thought I was going to go one of 3 routes. It was either going to be like a studio drummer or in a band. I had this pipe dream I was going to be like a kickboxer because I did a lot of that when I was growing up in the early days of what wasn't even called mixed martial arts at that point, or skateboarding, snowboarding. Obviously, I went the third way. But yeah, drumming for me, like that was my life growing up. Got my first kit when I was either 10 or 11 from my grandma. And, still that to me is like, I feel like the world that we're in, this action sports world and stuff, like I'm like up in the mix and doing stuff. And like, that's, some people are like, my little brother, for example, always thinks it's so cool, like all the stuff I'm doing. And to me, that's just kind of like what I do. But in the music world, like, oh my God, that's the shit.
Did you go to college?
No college.
Awesome.
I went to the University of Snow Summit.
University of Snow Summit and Hard Knocks.
Go ahead.
I thought so my whole game plan was I had no money. I'd been pretty much living on my own since I was 15. I'd worked 2-3 jobs, and I had no money for college. And so I thought, I'm going to go try and live in the mountains, see if I can become a pro snowboarder. I'll take like a year, maybe 2, to see if I can pull that off. And if I can't, I'll find a way to pay for college. And then Snow Summit ended up being a career path for me. And then I started S.P.T, and I just kept not finding time to go back to college.
Yeah. You would think Powdr Corp, they'd ask that question and be like,
oh yeah, I never
you
thought
know what
about
I mean?
You're
like,
an executive
like
without
you're
a college
executive
degree.
And you have no degree. Did that ever come up, or they just knew you were the man?
Yeah, no, it came up. I mean, my boss, who's the co-president at Powdr, Wade Martin, I'd worked with him a lot because he used to run the Do Tour. And before that, Gravity Games. In fact, he helped kind of create both of those properties. So I'd worked with him a long time. It wasn't like I was a brand new, like, who is this guy? Let's take a look at your resume. And so that was a question on there. And I'm like, hey, I didn't go to college.
Yeah.
Right? And he's a big Michigan State guy. And like, there's a lot of flags and stuff that fly in the office when it comes down to like March Madness or football or whatever.
Or Brady one.
Yep, exactly. And no, I think they, listen, I have 2 daughters. They're 13 and 14. And I am dead set on them going to college. And they'll sometimes be like, well, look at you, Dad, and you didn't go to college. And, it just wasn't along my sort of journey, but I definitely want them to go do that because I think I probably lucked out.
Yeah. Well, a lot of time it's just the people you meet at college that actually help you secure jobs in the future. And I think in our industry, we just are fortunate. We all get to meet each other, and it carries people to different positions. I
won't name his name, but there's a guy in the ski resort industry who probably at one point was the biggest swinging dick, if you will, like the most highest level guy in the resort industry. And he didn't go to college. And he and I used to talk about that. And he had a similar, very different, but similar, he tried it out the resort industry, kind of fell in love with it, was really good at it, and did incredibly well. He got to the top of the heap. And he's retired now. But I remember connecting with him a little bit on that. And there's I suppose, a little bit of a sort of a twinge there of like, I didn't go to college, but I did all right.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a whole college path to what you're doing, that they have the big on the resort industry and get you that position at the ski resort. And I don't know, but it's awesome. You carved your own way.
Yeah. And I think nowadays, but there's like ski area management programs you can take in different colleges and stuff. And I've spoken at a lot of those. Hell, I won in 1999. I won an award called the SAMI, which was the Future Leadership Award for the ski resort industry. And so I've done all right.
The SAMI.
I'm going to dissect something because it's so funny. We sit here, we talk about all this shit. none of us. I've never been to college.
I haven't been to
Bud's never been to college. None of our guests go to college. I didn't even think about that. Like I forget college is a thing. But I'm sitting here trying to learn, and what I've learned from talking to people like yourself is that like that determining factor. I think more, and it depends on your circumstances. I'm not telling people not to go to college, but what I find the people that have done well in their respected crafts have in common is they kind of they have that grit, they have that drive, they have that. I'm gonna walk to the. Oh, you're not gonna give me the job, or I'm not gonna get in the chairlift. I'm gonna walk all the way to the top of goddamn Snow Summit, and it's that trait. It's that trait that you're describing of not taking no for an answer that I find the most common of people sitting in that chair. It's not necessarily like the degree or the that's the determining factor I feel like I see, because I'm trying to learn myself. I didn't go to college. I don't fucking know
How
anything.
did these people get where they got?
Yeah.
Most people would have turned away when they got shut down when that guy said he didn't remember you at your first meeting or your second meeting with him. They would have left and went home.
I think that how you become a contributor in life, contributor to humanity or a contributor to the company you work for, is all built on just an endless series of experiences that you've gained throughout your life path. And so, on one hand, I think that, going to college really creates a lot of experience and knowledge and discipline in certain fields. And then just life experience and work experience gains a whole nother. And although I don't have a degree and didn't go to college, I also have, 4, 6, or 8, depending on, if you go to master's programs or grad school and stuff like that. I've got 8 years of a head start on other people my age at the time because I just was constantly working. And I have always had a hard work drive. Got that from my grandfather, Bill Bridgers, legend.
Quick pivot on a footnote we went over. I want to go back to we're talking about music. Talking to Chad from Nixon, who's we've brought up a lot in the show, absolute legend. He mentioned a story about how you wrote a letter to, I believe it was one of your favorite bands at the time. Maybe I'm butchering that.
For Neil Peart from Rush.
Yes.
You wrote Rush a letter?
I wrote Neil a letter when I was a kid.
Is he the drummer?
He's the drummer and lyricist.
And lyricist.
He wrote
the guy with the crazy sick voice.
No, that's Geddy Lee.
Oh, okay.
Geddy Lee's the bass player and singer. Neil's the drummer. So is that a story?
That's the story I want you to talk about.
I'm gonna have to tell a shortened version of that story because it's a pretty long one.
Let's keep it Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes. I'm like 11 years old, and my next door neighbor was like, "Oh, you're gonna be a drummer? You better listen to Rush because that's the best drummer in the world." So I get 2 Rush albums, and that's like saying I'd like to learn math, and I'm in 2nd grade, and they're like, "Oh, here's quantum physics." Wasn't the place to start, but it was certainly inspiring. And so I'm 11 or 12, and I wrote him a letter, and I don't even remember sending the letter, but I got a postcard back from him.
Really?
That answered all of my questions, and it was like, which instrument did you use on this song, and how many, what was your percussion chimes or whatever, and he answered it, and I was like blown away because he's a major rock star.
That's incredible.
Canadian, so they're all such nice folks.
They're
but
nice Americans, yeah.
American would not have done that.
And many years later, and I could spend 4 bombhole episodes talking about incredibly lucky situations I found myself in. And here was one where I had a buddy who was the stage manager at the Blockbuster Pavilion in Glen Helen. I'd go to Ozfest and Lollapalooza. I'd go to every show backstage, all access. It was awesome. And he calls me and says that Rush is rehearsing for their North American tour, and they need to hire a runner. And so I went down and became a runner for Rush for a week, which meant I picked them up at their hotel. I'd have breakfast with them. They'd play 3 shows a day, 3-hour-long shows a day in an empty 100,000-seat outdoor arena. I had my skateboard, and I would just skate through the whole place. I'd stand on the stage and stare, but I never once let on that I was a fan, because Neil Peart is considered one of, if not the greatest rock drummers of all time, and he doesn't love the fandom. He's famous for ignoring that. He's not a partier. He's like a scholar, a very cerebral writer. He's written a bunch of books. He writes all their lyrics, and he's a very heady guy, and it's very obvious if you're a Rush fan, he does not like that fandom. So I never let that on. And then many years later, after having worked with them, many years later, my younger daughter had got me this book that he wrote that was about, because he lost his wife and daughter in the same year. Wife to cancer, daughter to a car crash. And he took a motorcycle trip where he literally got on his bike in Toronto, very Forrest Gump style. Like he got on his bike and he just started riding, and he kept riding, and he went all the way to the tip of like Patagonia with like one change of clothes and a credit card, and wrote a book about it called Ghost Rider. And so my daughter bought me that book, and she was at the same age when I'd first written him that letter. So I started writing this whole letter to him of like how grateful I was for inspiring me all those years, and that now come full circle, my daughter's the same age I was, and somehow I pulled it together and survived, even though I shouldn't have. And then he died before I could send him the letter. Oh, so wow. Haven't got to send that one to him, but I got some friends in the music industry who are like, we will get the letter to the rest of his bandmates and his family. So I got to make that happen. That's probably what Chad's talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Never once let on. Now, I did steal a few of his drumsticks.
Did you?
And I've said he gave them to me, but it might have been more like I sort of had them like, you can have the drumsticks. Okay, like I don't think he said no, so no, it's mine.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to get into a little staple of the show. We like to do a little thing called hot takes. So what's your take on the MJ of snowboarding, or the GOAT in some people's words, both male and female? Who you got?
Oh man, I knew you were gonna do this. I think that I am gonna pull a Louis Vito, because
he's doing a Louis Vito.
A little bit, yeah. Because MJ, if there's an MJ, what do we mean by that? Like Craig Kelly's got to be like, I guess, the MJ. But snowboarding wasn't big enough then to like, if you say the Michael Jordan of sport, do you mean like the most dominant of all time? That's Shaun White. If it's the most ballsy, it's progressive. Maybe that's Travis Rice. Most well-rounded. That could be Pat Moore. It could be Sage. A guy like Todd was pretty darn well-rounded. Are we talking competitors or just influencers? Peter Line, JP, Jeremy. I mean, it just depends on what facet of the sport. Style-wise, you're talking Salaz, Roach.
You can't
Arthur
just
Longo.
name every pro snowboarder that you've ever heard of. You know what I mean?
I'm naming all the best ones in every category.
Talk about a veto.
It's not a veto is a dodge, but it is a backwards veto. It's a slight veto. I'll give you some veto points on that.
If there could only be one.
Jamie Anderson.
Female, right?
Oh,
what
yeah.
about for male?
I don't know.
It's your personal,
My personal, it's too hard because I'm friends with so many of these people and I've worked with them professionally so much. Instead of answering that, can I tell you one story about one special person?
Yes. That'll do.
You know who your real friends are in life, right? And I had this, back when I used to think I could ride a snowboard pretty well, I had this day where I was riding with Thien and JP and Jeremy at Snow Summit, and I went down hard. I dislocated my pelvis and got knocked out, broke my tailbone all in one knuckle. And when I opened my eyes, and if you've ever been knocked out, like you don't realize you've been knocked out, but you're in a different location and like the circumstances change, and you're like, how did time elapse? And I had been knocked out, and I get up and I had a radio, like a walkie-talkie radio, and JP's on the radio, and he's like, we need help. Gunny's down. We need help. And I'm like, give me that. I did not want anyone to know, and I definitely did not want to go down in a toboggan. And so I got up and I'm trying to ride, and I'm like blacking out, and I remember looking down. I can vividly remember where I was on a spot called Stinkbug Flats in Westridge Snow Summit. And I could see my shadow, and it looked funny because it looked like these arms. And I looked behind me, and Jeremy was riding like nuts to butts behind me because he thought I was going to pass out. And, Jeremy Jones is the kind of guy that, aside from, what a big influence he is in snowboarding, just is just a tremendous human. And he's that kind of guy that if you broke down in the middle of the night or in a bad pinch, he would stop what he's doing or wake up and come and help you. And so that's character less than, he's got all the snowboarding skills, but in terms of character, and I talked about integrity earlier, that's a guy that's got heaps of it. More people should have that. So I'm not going to answer who the MJ of snowboarding is, but I'll say that Jeremy's one of the most stand-up people I've ever known.
Facts right there.
That's a better answer anyway.
It's a great answer.
Much better answer. I love that. one thing we didn't talk about on the show is, I guess let's start first by the DC Mountain Lab, because the DC Mountain Lab, as I was on the consumer side, seeing wanting to be a part of it, watching the videos, it just seemed like a slice of heaven. And speaking with Ken Block yesterday about this episode, he had some really nice things to say. Like, he was basically saying, you came through and made the DC Mountain Lab, and they made shirts that said Gunny was here, and you had raised the bar, and he just kept reiterating the fact that people like Gunny are what make this industry rad. And I thought those were some flattering words coming from Ken, who doesn't really sing a lot of people's praises. And I just thought that he kept kind of reiterating how you raise the bar and keep this things to such a high standard and care, and it makes the industry rad. And I guess that's two different things, but I'd like you to talk about, the DC Mountain Lab days specifically.
Well, those are nice comments from Ken. He's a good friend and a long time friend, and he doesn't hand out compliments very often, so that's cool to hear. But look, I mean, Ken has had such killer vision for what he wanted to do in so many different facets of his life and his career. And the DC Mountain Lab was one of those things, right? He had this property that he'd bought and built, because he wanted to be in Utah more often, because he was based out of Southern California, and then found this, like he always does, turned it into sort of a marketing and business piece of his life as well as a lifestyle piece. And so this idea that, the original idea was like have this sort of haven hangout, kind of a training facility, but really more like this cool lifestyle hangout for the DC team. They all had lockers, and it was very limited who actually got invited to go there. And he'd bought the adjoining property to build out a park zone, and nobody had illusions that it was going to be like this mega ultimate training center, because there just wasn't enough vertical or pitch or anything like that. But could we make it cool as hell? Yeah. And so, he, kind of turned me and then our team loose on what we could design and build there. And it was cool because, it was pretty select who got invited to be there, even just to stay there once or just go through the gate. My crew and I would stay there for months during the summer shaping the dirt, because, we didn't have snowmaking. And so we were relying on natural snow. And so I go into every project with, okay, what's the goal and objective? What do we want to try and create? Okay, cool. What's the budget? Okay, got that. What's the time frame? As soon as you understand all those pieces, then you basically back into what can you create. And so with the DC Mountain Lab, with the space we had and the time and the effort, I mean, we had machines out there. We had, we were building huge jibs. We had that. If you guys remember, there was a up, flat, down box with a stair set that was filled. It was plexiglass. It was filled with shoes. That was an idea that Ken and I came up with. And the house itself was amazing. It was like MTV Cribs for the DC snowboard team. What a cool moment. We would shoot skeet off the balcony. I remember shooting with Big Black and Salema off the balcony, having like a sporting clays competition there. Yeah, so many great times there. It's funny because sitting on the couch playing Halo, just me and Ken, I don't think anybody else was there, and he casually mentions to me that he's going to start getting into rally racing. I'm like, what's that? Like Baja 500 kind of thing? And he's like, no, wait, what do you know what rally racing is? And I was like, he's like, it's huge in Europe, but I'm going to, and he laid out his plan. And then look at that. Like, he does the whole DC career, which would have been more than enough for anyone. And then now parlay that, move into the whole rally world. And for guys like Todd and I, who've known and been friends with Ken for a really long time, it was kind of funny because you see Ken so successful in turning all these athletes into megastars. Danny, Colin, Kalis, Deerdick, and then the snowboard team, even Pastrana when he got on DC. They did such a great job. He did such a great job of leveraging their athletes in the right way. But he always kind of remained a little behind the scenes, even though he had lots of things going on there. And then he gets into rally where it's really now more about him, which I'm not sure he was maybe comfortable with at first, but now he's Ken Block, and many people who follow Ken probably don't know a lot about his DC history, but they definitely know him for what he's done in the motorsports world, and he just keeps doing cooler and cooler stuff.
It's incredible.
And I'm lucky because I get to go hang with Ken out at his ranch, which we're converting into this incredible compound of awesomeness, where we go, we go on family vacations. Our kids are good friends. Our wives are friends, and we'll go and do all the stuff that we like to do, which is either dirt bikes or snowmobiles or UTVs. And yeah, it's Ken is an anomaly. Talk about an outlier. We mentioned earlier that guy's an outlier and a unique individual.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Marketing genius as well. One thing we got to talk about in your long list of accomplishments and accolades, if you will, is Mountain Movers. Show on National Geographic about building terrain parks and whatnot. How was that experience?
I guess that my advice would be careful what you wish for. At the time, all these like docu-reality shows were out there, like Orange County Choppers and Deadliest Catch and stuff like that. And I'd be like, these guys, my crew and we travel all over the world in the harshest of conditions with, millions of dollars of machinery, building stuff for the, world's top athletes under high deadline pressure. So much cooler than that. And so I wrote up this treatment, they call it, and I went and I pitched it to Steve Astafin, who's a good buddy of mine and has been an agent in action sports. And he immediately said, like, you're an idiot. You're a fucking idiot. This will never happen. And that's stupid anyway. But okay, let me see if I can connect you with people. And Sheckler had just finished the show Life of Ryan and the production company that had done that show. And it was just ending on MTV. We met with those guys. They liked the idea. And then we started kind of shopping that around. And that whole process was really interesting. We would go, well, first of all, we majorly lucked out in that I happened to get a meeting through a friend of a friend with this guy who was like the chief marketing officer of GM, General Motors, one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the, if not the biggest advertisers in the world, if you add up all their brands, Chevy, GMC, Cadillac. And he thought the show idea was awesome. And he's like, we're doing it. We're done. He like literally, we're having a dinner meeting and he makes a phone call to somebody in Detroit and says, hey, I got this guy Gunny here. I'm going to put him on the phone and we're going to make a show with him. Here he is. And this guy's got a $2 billion budget, right? And so next thing you know, of course, now we're in meetings with everyone, Discovery and True TV and MTV and National Geographic. And we ended up going with National Geographic. And so I owned a third of the show. Carbone and the production company owned a third, and GM owned the third. So I'm like tripping, like I'm in business and own this thing, this new property with General Motors. And, the good news was that I had a pretty heavy amount of creative control over the storylines and each episodic deal. And it wasn't straight up like Real Housewives, just contrived fake bullshit. It was really centered around a project, kind of a start to finish. What's the payoff? What's the process to get there? Who are the players involved? What's the struggle? And so, our whole crew was pretty highlighted, but you quickly learned that having a mic and a camera on you all the time is not that cool. And it was fun and neat in the beginning, and definitely like the behind the scenes of how it works is something I'm always interested in. But knowing that every fart and comment and everything is recorded and could be used. Now, luckily I had some veto control on like editing and stuff, but nevertheless, there was still like very cheesy moments that, you can't, you're going for a chainsaw cut in the side of a takeoff. And then it's like, cut, can you do that more dramatically? And it's like, no, we cut it. It's done. Like you can't redo that. But there was a lot of that kind of crap. I go back and watch little snippets. I can't watch any of those episodes, but if I watch a snippet, I'm like, oh, it's so cringy. But it was cool. And, we were on National Geographic and we learned a lot. And, that's something that, I got a poster in my office and it's got the whole team. That was sort of to me, that was at the pinnacle peak of the true S.P.T crew and what we were doing during my time, running that business that I'd started when I was 23 years old and eventually sold off when I moved here to Utah. And I look back on that Mountain Movers with a lot of cringe on one hand, but also a lot of love because it was like that crew coming together. And I mean, we got a lot of cool shit out of it. We had, give us like 8 Chevy trucks and, it was pretty cool.
I'm excited to go watch this.
Nah, maybe don't watch too much of it. You'll be laughing.
We'll find those cringe moments.
Yeah.
What I hear too from there is like also sometimes you got to do shit to realize that maybe you don't want to do it. It's like you had a goal. Oh, I want to have this TV show, this reality show. and you did it, but you also realize, oh shit, I guess I don't really want to do this, you know, and that's important too, you know.
Every step of the way, people said, this isn't going to work. This will never happen. The odds of it happening are super low. And I just kept believing that I could make it happen. You know, I think I've mentioned a lot of luck involved here, but there's a saying that you make your own luck, right? If you put yourself in the right circumstance, you do it the right way, you do it with a good heart and a good thought, you surround yourself with the right people, you can make your own luck, right? You can make your own bad luck too, by the way.
Totally. I heard something I was reading last night, and you don't live life, you live patterns, is what I read. And I thought that was super. Actually, Leah read it and read it out loud to me next to me. But she said, you don't live life, you live patterns. And I thought that was so interesting because the way we go through our life, it is patterns. And the pattern of making your own luck, coming from consistently doing hard work, you know, is kind of how I just kind of tied that together. Just a little bit loose and wonky, but I don't know, just something that came into my head.
Well, you find patterns that work for you, right?
Yeah.
And then you go there. That's like, you know, it's a little bit of like Buddhist philosophy, but every moment of your life, every day of your life, there's hundreds, if not thousands or millions of inputs that are constantly like evolving you a little bit or a lot in certain cases. And so how you take those and forge your own path, good, bad, successful, failure, are all just continuous, little inputs that are constantly happening in your world. And nowadays, everyone's receiving so much information. Man, it's distracting.
Hard to limit the inputs. Overload of inputs.
Yeah, overload your phone nonstop.
I want to just freestyle on one thing for a second.
Yeah.
So earlier I mentioned that, you know, when I'd hiked the mountain, and this guy Terry had a ski patrol at Snow Summit. He'd forgotten that he gave me the application and all that. But to go back to that guy and give him a massive amount of credit after all that, and I get hired, you know, at least the way it worked, everyone on ski patrol had a 500 number. So if you're like 522 and 537, and he started jokingly calling me 50 Gunny. He was 501. Like the top guy is 501, number 2 is 502, and he started calling me 50 Gunny. And I thought that was funny because like my grandfather on my dad's side had his name his entire life was Gunny. Like he went by, nobody even called him his real name ever. Even my grandmother would call him Gunny. And I'm like, that's pretty funny. Like that's what people call my grandpa. And then he passed away that same year. I'll never forget walking in. This is before cell phones. I think I got a text or a page, and I had to go down to a payphone at the Shell station and call my grandma, and she let me know that he passed away. And it was interesting because all in that same time frame, so this was 93, is when people started calling me Gunny. And then now, I mean, probably more people know me as Gunny and don't even know my real name.
Yeah.
And it was thanks to that guy. And he might have hurt me then that 1 week, but man, he really helped me over the rest of my life. Not because he coined the term Gunny, but because he was one of those people that sort of believed in me and let me kind of thrive and grow my career.
Did he really forget you came in a couple days beforehand, or is he just messing with you?
I never pressed him on that one, but I'm pretty sure he purposely forgot. Yeah, like who is this guy? Like I don't have time for this guy that shows up with his blue hair and you know, not who we want here. But
and but then he helped you sharpen your teeth, get a little confidence, get a little swagger, a little pep in your step to make those next moves, and that's beautiful. Well, I think we've been doing it. We've almost done it. Before we get out of here, do you want to throw any thank yous out?
Man, so many thank yous. I'd say a thank you to everybody I work with at Powdr. Man, I work with such an incredible team there currently, Powdr and Woodward, and that's a long list. So I'll just say the Powdr and Woodward family. Yep, there we go. And then to the S.P.T crew, still holding it down. It's cool because now I actually hire S.P.T to do work with us on different projects and stuff. And so still get to work with them a lot. So huge horn blast for those dudes and ladies. And then, did we just hear Chad Denena?
Yeah, I hit the wrong button.
Because that was going to be one of my next ones. That was crazy.
That was him reminding you.
Thank you for the trigger. Chad Denena, a guy who constantly comes up in, horn blast, gunshot, shotgun, whatever, nuclear blast.
We don't have the nuke.
We need to get a nuke.
Yeah.
Mushroom crowd.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll work on that.
Oh, you know what we got for him? Here we go.
Yes.
An applause.
Chad's been one of those guys, he just connects so many people out of just such the goodness of his heart, and very never because of selfish reasons, always just because he wants to do cool stuff. So yeah, Chad, Todd, Jeremy, everybody who helped me along the way, like there's so many, but I'd say the snowboard community and the action sports community at large for just representing something that's cool and joyful, and let's remember to do it with the right intentions, which is staying true, but also helping the next generation along. I mean, that's in a nutshell why I'm at where I'm at today in terms of working with Powdr and Woodward. Is I believe that listen, I've been so fortunate over this career I've had to have been involved in so many different cool and monumental things with amazing people and in phenomenal locations, and I felt like there's I got to give back to how do we get more people into these sports, more kids skateboarding, more kids doing BMX, snowboarding, skiing, and outdoors and active, and being a part of this culture that's been so good to me. Started with a guy like Stacy Peralta, who believed in team concept, believed in brand building, believed in videos, and did it for all the right reasons. And so I wanted to do things with the right reasons on a bigger scale, and I got a platform to do that, try and build up this next generation, try and help move our career move our industry forward in lots of ways. And so I'm just grateful for everybody who's allowed me to get to that point so that I can do a better job of giving back.
God, that's beautiful.
Well
Eloquently
said right there.
Yeah, I think we're going to leave the people with that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate having you on, dropping some serious knowledge, inspiring our listeners, inspiring myself. And lastly, I want to say thank you to our listeners, viewers watching this. We really appreciate you guys, and we will see you next Wednesday. Over and out from the bomb hole.